Welcome to another episode of Summoning Insight. We've got a couple of very good guests today after the T1 drama, and especially as we're winding up towards the LCK playoffs. It was a great time to invite color commentator Wolf on. We'll see him first in just a little bit. And Jiizuke, obviously, will be coming on later as well to talk about Evil Genius's current epic win streak that was snapped this weekend, but is still pretty damn good overall, looking like the top team right now over in the LCS. Means we probably won't have a lot of LEC discussion, but we are, as suggested by Thorin earlier, before you guys could hear him talking on this phone call, that we do talk about LEC a little bit in the context of having streamers come on the broadcast as guests and as guest commentators. So, Thorin, why don't you kick this one off with your thoughts from this past week of LEC?
Yeah, basically, if people don't know, on the last show of LEC, they had Thebausffs FFS, who is a streamer. I don't even know. I think he's European somewhere. I basically don't know anything about this guy. Like, I will say I don't watch streams. But as far as I can tell from reading Reddit over the years and the damage that's done to my brain and soul, he's a guy where basically he's occasionally been in trouble because I think he's like more like an entertainment streamer than like, you know, like a hardcore trying to be the best at the game. And so I know in the past I'd seen some threads that were like, you know, he's entering this game. I believe he even got banned by Riot, and then they said it was like accidental when he was like, you know, like 0-10 in a game. But I think from memory, if you actually looked at the game, he was like trying. He wasn't just like purposely into it or whatever, you know. So it's like there's already like, you know, some question marks there. But the problem I have is this: they didn't present it as like secretly this guy is actually one of the most knowledgeable people in the game. They just made it like, hey, you know, when we bring in random people from CSGO that you like, fuck it, here's a guy from solo queue. So when he was announced, basically, he was going to be on LEC, which, as I alluded to there, listen, if you're going to get mad at that, like, what, but you're cool with people who basically come from other games coming in? Yeah, because they're in a different role. They're the host. This is supposed to be a fucking expert. He's essentially a colour commentator, motherfuckers. By the way, the most knowledge-rich job in the entire broadcast. So the crazy thing to me is this. The context of this discussion, unfortunately, can't start there. I'd like it if this was last week's show and we'd known this and we could have had a discussion. Oh, what would it be like? And what do we think? You know, we're both broadcast veterans, obviously. By the way, anyone's like, no, you're not fine. Suck my dick. I've done 8 world championships or something and about 60 lands in CSGO. Get on my level. Let me know when any League of Legends person gets to 60 lands, by the way. I'll wait. It'll be about 10 years. So anyway, basically, obviously, we know quite a lot about this topic. But the problem is, I have to set this context up first, that Monty didn't know this drama element because, again, it comes from Reddit, which is just a fucking, it's like how they described whatever, Mos Eisley in fucking Star Trek and Star Wars, whatever. I don't give a fuck about your
wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Basically, the problem is this whole discussion was coloured by 2 factors. One, this guy is a popular streamer. So as a result, people do that stupid ass thing that they do, Monty, when they just like people, like, give him a chance. It's like, I don't have to give people chances for amazing jobs. You have to be qualified. What the fuck are you talking about? You wouldn't just go, oh, my mate's just becoming the CEO of Pepsi. Ever worked in business? Nah, just give him a chance. Like, that's not the way the real world works. That's the way your fantasy world works. But here's the other element. So there's that already. That ambience is already there. And then, as usual, just like when I like a really great player, if people go, is there any way I can dislike him, even though he obviously is a fucking amazing player? Like, in the same way, right, the wrong person came out against it, Monty. Because Promiscu had the audacity, and obviously Promiscu was the guy that everyone knows has never been a very good pro when he's actually played in LEC, unfortunately, and on top of it, made the cardinal sin. You can never be forgiven and washed clean from this. He flamed someone in solo queue in a mean way. By the way, if Double had said the same thing, but without slightly edgy elements, people would just be laughing their asses off saying LEC. But anyway, because Promiscu came out against him, and A, sucks in the game on LEC, and B, sort of is a flamer, people were like, dismissing the notion you could be in any way skeptical of this move. You had to basically be all in on it, and you had to just be sort of like, well, you know, who are we to judge? You have to let it happen. So since most people were fairly like, you know, like, I would say like going out of their way to sort of like this aspect, like the premise of it, but let's have a discussion about it. And obviously, we don't give a fuck about going against the grain. So what do you think, actually, initially? I'll give my thoughts in a minute. What do you think? Because here's the thing. On my other talk show, I just sort of like did a devil's advocate and was like, well, you know, as long as it's a one-off appearance, it's not the end of the world. And, you know, it's not really taking a job totally from someone because, you know, if you really wanted the job, you'd want to be a permanent caster on LEC. You wouldn't want a one-off. You know, I had a bunch of like sort of angles, but I didn't really go the harsh angle because I also wanted to see what he'd be like on the actual show. So what do you think, Monty, about this premise of basically someone with no broadcast experience as far as I can tell coming on the show?
Well, I think it's basically the future of esports, and I think that unfortunate, like this is, I mean, frankly, I think it's sad as somebody who really cares and has spent 15 years doing professional commentary for 7 different esports now. I think it's sad that a lot of people are trying to take this personality or streamer angle as opposed to somebody who has the chops of professional commentary. And here are the common fan complaints, which is like, well, it's, these people are entertaining, so I want to watch the entertaining one. But you're basically just buying into a cult of personality at that point, and that doesn't create sustainable leagues because you don't actually have the craft to create narratives that are attractive to people. The only narrative is, do I like this streamer? Yes, and so I will follow them to whichever game. Look at Shroud, for example. He was co-streaming IEM this past weekend, IEM Cologne from the semifinals onward. He's been dominating the broadcast, like triple the numbers of the official Valorant broadcasts. And so, wherever Shroud goes, it seems like the audience kind of follows more or less, especially in non-developed esports without real storylines like Valorant. And miss me with that shit when you're gonna be like, Valorant has storylines, not compared to Counter-Strike, which has 20 years of storylines, you fucking idiots. So, but the point is, and I think this is, Azael's tweets were also getting a lot of flack, which I thought was.
What was it just the way he said?
Basically, like, I don't want to misrepresent him here, but basically, like, this isn't good to take away from the opportunities of people who are aspiring to be casters, basically. And I think there is a level of professionalism on these main broadcasts.
Which, I'll just say, I think was actually what Promiscue's sentiment was. His was something like, imagine, you were like an up-and-coming caster for years and years, and then, some guy was like I don't know if he said memer or feed, or, imagine something like that takes your spot, basically. He said something sort of similar, but a bit harsher. Yeah.
And so, I think Azael has good points. Now, I also think that, I will come clap Azael here in a second because I think he deserves a little bit of criticism for what he said as well. But in general, I think there is despair among lifetime casters right now because people are looking at the amount of money you can make casting. And then they're looking at the amount of money that you can make co-streaming as a personality. And we've talked about this before on this show, but Riot has basically franchised co-streaming the LCS. They've given away the golden tickets. You will notice that they have not given any of these golden tickets away to any casters that have kind of left a Riot broadcast. So, for example, here's a fun one for you. Why doesn't Ender have co-streaming privileges right now? Because he moved back to Los Angeles. He's appearing on the LEC. Oh. He's appearing on the LPL now. Just like Dom is now casting on the LPL. I do think Dom is closer to a caster, though, than a traditional streamer, because that's kind of just what he does these days, is sort of like recast live games. Like, basically, he is just a co-streamer. So it's a little bit different. But you look at this and you say, if you're a caster, well, I'm making, here's a guess for you, like 150 to 200K maybe tops as a caster if you're at the very upper level. And you're looking at somebody who is co-streaming who's making millions of dollars a year. And you're saying, like, I could do this. And they're not even giving co-streaming privileges to other LCS personalities or casters while they're not even working those days. Like, a lot of these guys only work 2 out of 3 days of the week. But they're not allowed to co-stream. So, I think some of this from Azael is being reasonably salty at this situation. Like, I'm reading subtext.
You mean in a sense, like, justifiably, yeah?
Yeah, justifiably, yes. Salty because, all of a sudden now you're looking at these streamers who are now appearing as color commentators, and it does invalidate a lot of the work you put in. Now, you may or may not like Azael, but he's put in a lot of the work. Now, where I will criticize Azael is as follows. Many of these League of Legends casters for Riot, especially on LCS, have been working for years doing 2 broadcast days a week. And I would say doing like 4, 5, 6, as well, yeah. 4, 5, 6 BO1s a week, guys.
Yes.
Now, what do they do with the rest of their time? Oh, they appear on Riot podcasts, for example. Do they make much of their own content? No. Do they stream? No. I mean, Captain Flowers does, and he actually has generated a very good following for himself and a very good brand. But you don't get to spend...
don't know, I've noticed.
Yeah, most of the analysts don't do that. And so basically what they're complaining about is these streamers who work their fucking ass off. Like, look at I Will Dominate, for example, who's co-streaming. He streams like every LCS, LEC, LPL game. I mean, this guy's on camera like 50 hours a week, plus the shows that he's doing. He built up his own brand. Now, the Riot casters, I can just tell you, because when I was casting in Korea, I was doing sometimes 10 best of threes a week. Plus I was doing this show, Summoning Insight. Plus I was doing the Countdown of MonteCristo. Plus I was creating my own content and VOD reviews. Plus I was professionally coaching. And so when my sympathy kind of runs out when you spent years of your life basically not capitalizing on the advantage that you have. And then now that the co-streamers and the streamers and the personalities are coming to eat your lunch, you start getting salty. It's like, you could have done this work. You could have been these people. You could have left Riot and done this on yourself. You didn't want to take the risk. And now the people who have struggled on their own to build up their own brands are suddenly coming and taking away these broadcast positions or taking away the co-streaming licenses. Tough fucking titties. You know what I mean? You could have worked harder. You had years of systemic advantages that were given to you, and you didn't use it.
With all that said, though, I have to say I do have an issue with this particular specific one of the Thebausffs. Like, when I actually watched him on the show, he was okay. Like, he didn't shit his pants and just fucking roll around on the floor crying or anything. He was just okay. But I will say, I actually thought he actually made a very reasonable comment in the twit-longer he did after the event where he basically implied, like, and here's the thing, he wasn't just saying this to be humble, guys. I could tell this on the broadcast. He essentially said, like, thanks to, like, Sharks, Quickshot, like, people like that, they basically sort of carried me. Like, I was really nervous. I was, like, having trouble sleeping the night before. By the way, it all makes perfect sense. It's why it's a performance sport. Like, one of the things you idiots at home don't realize is, when we like barely trip over our words, deliver a joke properly, look at the second camera when we say a joke, that's fucking skills. You don't just get out of bed and just have those. You actually have to fucking work on those. You're not just born with them. So my problem is this, right? I've got all the angles covered on this one. I could do a whole video, but it's not worth that. I'll just use the intro for this. So first of all, what are his skills, right? Now, presumably, since I believe he's an EUS like streamer or whatever, presumably he's good at the game, right? So then here's the question. Why wasn't this just billed as, this is actually like the sleeper fucking analyst who has loads of inside game knowledge from playing, and that's why we're bringing him in? No, y'all brought him in for the memes and the entertainment, and people were even loving, that was the main highlight, was when he, by the way, I will say, this is just the way life works, unfortunately. In an actual game that he was doing, Monty, Astralis was playing and Promiscu did feed. And he did obviously make a comment referencing a meme of what Promiscu had said. Because, listen, Promiscu, you
set
did that
yourself up for
mate.
that one.
You can also dominate the game if you do that, So, but with that said, right, in this scenario, as far as I can tell, you brought him on the show because of what he is on stream, right? A memer or some sort of entertainment. In that case, by the way, lean into it. Like, I hate that personally. I don't want it to be WWE. I want it to be sports. But if you're going to hire that guy, bring it on. Because if it's just for game knowledge, well, then why the fuck are we bringing this guy on? There's a million people with insane game knowledge who have never touched a Riot stream, by the way, and never will. And I'm not talking, by the way, just about people like out in the ether or something. Because here's my problem. It's not that this guy can never be on camera. And by the way, don't anyone take what I said earlier. I've never got any broadcast experience. Yeah, actually, he's just Twitch streamer. Not even vaguely the same. Not even vaguely the same. I would say this. If this guy wants to be on LEC, there's an obvious path to doing it. Here's what you do. Get a little deal with one of the RLs. So you know what? EU Masters, there's something that needs viewership. Get them to let you come on for a day. And you know what? If you show your chops, you show, hey, there's something here, as well as whatever you can do on stream. Yeah, now maybe people bring you to LEC for a day. My problem with this, and this is actually going to tie back into the whole like core stream wrangle when it's ex-pros, is I don't mind the ex-pro doing his own stream. That's up to you to opt into going to that. But imagine if, for example, cause Doublelift is huge, they just brought him on instead of like Emily Rand on the LCS, and we're just like, well, he's got huge viewership. It's like, he's not qualified to do that job yet. Like, he hasn't put in the hours to show that he should be in her place. Because that's my problem. I suspect, personally, that the sinister part is also why some of the casters don't like it, is these motherfuckers, streamers, make so much money that, here's the other joke, guys, they wouldn't do it if you told them to earn their way. If you told them to earn their way to that broadcast, like anyone else would, they'd say, no thanks, I make more money streaming, and it's no stress. Oh, he might, but I'm talking about these people. Like, most of the big, like, put it so like Doublelift or someone probably would just say no. Like, mate, he doesn't even want to play the fucking spring split when he gets paid more than God. So here's the other angle, right? Everyone's going to go, what are you talking about, Thorin? Are there people out there like that? Listen, bozo, there's a person you're all loving on the broadcast who did this. His name's Trouble Inc. He literally made it through ERLs, EUMAS, and did exactly what I'm talking about. That's how you do it legit. Now, as I said, you can make it just like a simple angle of like, well, it's a one-off. It was just to have, a bit of spice for 1 week or whatever. Why do it in the summer, right in the middle of the most important split then? Why not make that like week 1 of fucking spring or something? So my issue is this, right? I think this is the good angle as well. I just looked at his Twitch now because I thought maybe he's actually someone who comments. Maybe, for example, he does reviews of LEC after each week or something, or talks about it. I can't find any fucking esports content. The closest I can find, Monty, is he did some Twitch Rivals castings, or it might have even played in it. I'm not even sure on that one. So here's my issue, right? We live in a world that Dom and LS created for all of us called Live View. You can just get someone to make you a simple site. There's a good way to earn yourself on the broadcast. Do a month of live viewing of LEC, and then if you're good, we can just fucking bring you in. Because I've brought people in, by the way. Like for Flashpoint 2, the last tournament I worked at with Monty, I brought a guy in who'd never worked on a single broadcast on camera. How hypocritical, Monty. Oh, except I'd only done like dozens of talk shows with this guy, talked to this guy for hours and hours. I'd grilled this guy to the nth degree, man. I knew he was legit.
And also, he made a bunch of YouTube videos about professional Counter-Strike.
Took a lot of initiative.
And like he is focused on the professional scene. The problem with these streamers is that if you're not doing live viewing, you don't know the storylines of the professional scene because you're not watching the product. You know what I mean? Like there's tons of LEC games this week. That's not an issue, right? You have your own stream, you've got your own brand, you're developing your own thing. But like you're not an esports expert, and you're not an expert over the long-term meta shifts analysis.
You've just triggered me there, mate, because here's another thing I hate. And listen, we're never going to free Riot of this, but I'm sure you hate it as well. I don't want to hear that because he's an EUS challenger, Monty. He doesn't need to know the players, Monty. He knows the champions. Fuck everything about you. That's like that comment Doublelift made years ago where, listen, he didn't do it obnoxiously, so I won't say fuck Doublelift. But when Doublelift said on some, I think it might even have been in one of my interviews or on like some Travis thing about like, in like 2016, Monty, he tried to be like, I just take the nameplates off. Who cares who the guy playing it is? And it's like, cocksucker, if you think that literally Poor Belter playing LeBlanc is the same as Faker playing LeBlanc, which is what you imply, you know nothing about professional esports. Like, that is the stupidest take of all time, mate. It's the same reason why I hate it when people make a global meta. And then they're like, it's weird how Ignar's picking an off-meta pick that he's played his entire career as a fucking god on. Oh my god, he carried the game. It's like, yeah, maybe we should actually know what these players' tendencies are. Dude, imagine that. Imagine getting a guy on the NBA Finals, and he goes, listen, I don't watch the NBA, but you know what? I have played a lot of basketball. And he goes, oh wow, he's just made a sick 3-pointer. Yeah, Steph Curry, you daft cunt. Like, he's not playing up. You know what I mean? Like, it would be ridiculous. You'd think, this is like, you're making a mockery of the broadcast. So basically, my angle is that if it's just for funsies, do it a different time or do it on a lesser broadcast. If it's supposed to be legit, earn your way there. And if it's just like for some WWE angle, I'm just disappointed with what the broadcast's supposed to be at that point in time, you know?
Yeah, and I think the counter argument to this is, like, especially with all these co-streamers rising up, is that, and a lot of these co-streamers do not care about the storylines. Like, they're there just to build their own brands, right? And they're not going to be the ones who are doing the in-depth research about player tendencies, or they're just going to give their takes on the game. And some people like that, and that's fine. But I do think that it's threatening to a lot of casters, especially, I think it's especially threatening to Valorant and to LCS casters and the North American audience, where they see, the trends moving away from them and maybe them not having a job. But the problem too is that there's no escape for these people, guys, because here's the thing. Riot doesn't even let the casters appear on co-streams on their days off, because here's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of one of these casters.
Mandated that they're not allowed to do that?
I've never seen it. I've never
just
seen it.
behind the scenes that you heard, right? Okay.
I don't think, look.
Sounds plausible, by the way.
If it is allowed, nobody's doing it, which is weird, right?
That's true.
And they have to approve guests on these co-streams. And here's my theory. If I'm an LCS caster and I start going on Dom's or LS's co-streams and I cut a deal with Dom or LS to like share revenue because it's going to increase the viewership if it's me and this other person every week or another co-streamer, well then I can leave the LCS broadcast, right? I talked about this previously years ago when I talked about how Riot was not allowing the casters to make a lot of their own content or to monetize their streams or to monetize their YouTube channels. They basically constructed a prison where it was impossible to escape because you couldn't make a transition financially out of that lifestyle into freedom, basically. And it's the same stuff. Just the same stuff in a different way now.
By the way, that's even an obvious angle that someone would try. Like, I'll give you an obvious example, right? He might not want the publicity, but let's say next year, right? Jat went to pick whoever you want, pick Doublelift or someone, and he says to Doublelift, look, your stream's really good, but it's sort of a bit memey, it's just a bit like, do you want to do like one where it's half and half, like I'll come on, you're on it, and then you provide like the pro aspect, and you can do fun, and I'm like a pro, I've obviously worked a million days. Dude, that'd be mutually beneficial to both people, and as you say, or imply, that'd be an instant rival to the Riot broadcast. Like, I'd watch that over the fucking LCS. I already watch Dom anyway, man. I don't watch the real broadcast.
Look, imagine what Captain Flowers could do with a co-stream. Like, he is clearly the most valuable asset that Riot has on the LCS, because he's such a skilled caster, and he's built up his own stream and brand that he could just bring in any professional player, make him instantly comfortable, because he is very, very skilled as a play-by-play commentator in terms of kind of setting up his co-casters, his color casters for success. It would be an amazing product, right? It would be an amazing product. And I think that's what they're very afraid of right now. And I think the casters themselves are getting increasingly frustrated. Just like this is just me reading between the lines on Azael's series of tweets, is that, first off, it's a frustration that, his skill set that he's developed is not really being appreciated right now, which I think is valid. And I do think he's a good caster. Secondly, like, I think that you look at the opportunities and you say, okay, this isn't how I think people should become professional casters, which you touched on in depth, Thorin, which I think is absolutely accurate. And I think the third part of it is that people are frustrated that, you can't, it's getting harder to make a living and you're getting the short end of the stick. So
there was one other topic we wanted to touch on briefly, which was, obviously, like, listen, on the Crackdown and other shows, I've obviously like driven into the ground the whole story of like the CLG PR where they did that stupid ass video where they were like, you might all be dead tomorrow. Now enjoy the game, like that fucking. Yeah, he didn't do that obviously, but you get the gist. Well, basically, everyone in CLG, understandably, apparently is depressed with the situation. Like, I mean, I saw this thing where, like, if you do go and look, I saw this on Doublelift stream, if you go and look at, like, Brox's tweets, he's one of those people, Monty, who does the tweet after every loss, like, oh, I'm so sad, oh, it didn't work out. So as a result, his Twitter feed's just like the... dark. It's dark, mate. There's no light. It's like, what the fuck is this? It's like, when's Gandalf come over the hill? This is getting really, really bad, mate. So basically, Paul Belter did a similar one, obviously the mid laner of CLG. And basically, I'll quickly read it out. He just did 2 tweets. He said, that was painful to watch. I know for sure players on CLG are way better than that. I think the team environment became way too negative and doomed. Super, super high pressure. And I don't think anyone can succeed or play with confidence under those circumstances. The morning before the last match I played for CLG, I broke down crying in front of my coach because I just felt increasingly sheer misery over the past few weeks. It just felt like nothing at all was going right. I had never felt that way in 7+ years as an LCS pro. What do you think about this, Monty?
I think the CLG situation.
It seems legit. It seems like he's actually been honest.
Yeah, Phillips is a real dude. It's like I take what he's. I don't feel like I have to take what he says with a grain of salt, right? He's never given me reason to do that, and he's just kind of very honest in his presence. And what I can say is, like, I get it. Like, the CLG roster, as we talked about last week, shouldn't be this bad. Based on the veterans that they have, they should be at least a mid-table team. So yes. I can understand the frustration if they can't figure out their synergy. And this is what I said on Twitter, which is like, sometimes it's just, the roster doesn't gel. Look at what happened with Misfits a couple of years ago when you get like the Gorilla Soaz, like looking like a super good lineup, much better than this lineup on paper. And they just bomb, And if you have those expectations and the coaching staff and the organization has those expectations, I think it can be pretty depressing. But that said, here's the other aspect of this, Pro Belter. Like, here's the thing about sports. It's both the highest, like, why people compete is because winning is like one of the highest highs you can ever have. It doesn't get fucking better than that. Like, it doesn't. I think about my time as a coach and a team owner, and when the wins came in, like when we qualified Renegades for LCS, the emotional high is just insane. But like the lows are really, really low. And at the end of the day, when I thought about going to coaching or continuing in ownership or management of a different organization, I just didn't want to do it anymore because the emotional extremes were too great. That was the biggest reason that I had. And because I didn't want to rely on other people for those emotional extremes, I wanted to be able to be the one in control of the situation, where if I'm relying on other people to play the game for me, or teammates or a large organization, it becomes very difficult to do that. So all I can say is like maybe this is like the lowest of the low, and we can't know the circumstances. But everybody's saying like, oh, CLG must be in a terrible situation. Maybe like I don't know what's going on internally. Like we saw that one clip, which is one moment in time. Like the rest of the time could have been perfectly acceptable. That could have just been like a uniquely bad time to broadcast to the public, a one-off bad instance. Like you have to think about it in a broader context that we can't see. But I will say, like, you know. Sometimes you just experience those lows, and maybe it's good that Pobelter has never had in his career like this level of sadness about a roster. But that just comes with the territory in sports, in my opinion. And so for people then to be bandwagoning on CLG and say, oh man, this must be a terrible org. It's like highly competitive people are going to have highly emotional reactions to losing. And you may not have those reactions, and it doesn't necessarily mean that CLG is doing anything wrong. I will say that the game against Immortals this last weekend was one of the most depressing games of League of Legends I've ever seen, in that it's rare you can see through a team's play that they are just completely mentally broken. And like how they could lose that game when they had such an enormous lead and then they just sat there and they just waited to die was unique in this game's history. That was a uniquely depressing game.
The thing I found weird about this set of comments is I also think a part that Pobelter himself maybe hasn't reflected on and sort of taken into context is where he's at in his life and his career. Because he's been in teams almost as bad as this. Like I think of some of those fucking Winter Fox lineups where like that, where they were like that fucking coach was just putting himself in his ADC and stuff. Like also, that'd be depressing the fuck out of me.
Knowing what happened behind the scenes at like Winter Fox 2, like I do.
And also, there was the split he had. Like, I remember he had one split when let me look it up here.
Look, all I'm saying is, like, I can't believe that CLG right now is possibly worse than Winter Fox was at that time, knowing what I know.
He also had a split in 2019 where he was on FlyQuest where they went 5-13 and finished 9th. He had, obviously, with CLG last year in spring and summer, it was garbage. So, in terms of results, they've been bad. So, one thing I would say is this. Obviously, it depends what Pobelter's expectations are. So I would suggest when he was in Winter Fox, he was a young buck. He still had all the years ahead of him. He was actually considered, by the way, probably the best player in the team, and everyone knew he was probably destined for better things. I also think he's had a very good career, actually. He's probably been quite an underrated player. Then I'll add in, he has bombed Worlds a bunch of times. I'm sure that feels terrible. But again, I'm sure at least I got there, and I felt like I had the chance. I got the Korean boot camp. The problem I think here is Pobelter is in a situation where he is painted into a corner. Like there probably is nowhere after this. Like put it this way, if any LCS team picks him up now, I wouldn't say like it's terrible. It's not like he can't have a comeback. He could do a John Travolta in Pulp Fiction and still be good again one day. But it's not, put it this way, the trend doesn't look good at the moment. Obviously, he's kind of like Nuke Dog after the last split or whatever. Everyone's sort of out on him. And I'll throw this in if you're Pobelter. I know you can't take this into account because it is your career. But if CLG had actually managed the offseason, well, you wouldn't be in the team, mate. Like they were trying to get a super team together with like god tier players. Like they weren't trying to get Pobelter. Like you weren't the top of the list when they were headhunting, mate. Like that's and also you did rejoin a team that basically fucking kicked you. So all I'm going to say on that one is I'd maybe think twice about that. I don't go back to the same door when you kick me in the face, mate. So there is that one. But no, here's the thing. Obviously, on an individual, personal level, I feel sorry for him. Feels bad. But I do kind of agree with you. One thing I never do, by the way, is I never do the thing of like, this pop star makes millions, so like, boo-hoo. It's like, listen, it still fucking emotionally hurts. You don't literally take money and wipe your tears. But at the same time, as Monty said, basically the whole point of playing pro is one set of people get to be the winners, one team, and everyone else on some level feels like a loser unless they massively overperformed. So basically, you are signing up for a lifetime of heartache. Unless, by the way, you're Faker, and spoiler, even Faker had the years where he was depressed. Like, it's just literally, I'm sorry, it is part of the territory. It'd be like when we complain about, like, mean comments, right? Yeah, they suck. They do hurt our feelings, but we can also stop them tomorrow by just stop putting out content, stop going on camera. Like, that's always in our back pocket.
And also, it ignores the fact that there's all the good shit about, all the nice comments, which are like 99-1, or the appreciation that we get for doing these shows or content that we do. So, yeah, I mean, it's contextual, too. When celebrities are upset about something, even though they have it really good, you have to understand that there's a level of stress and pressure that comes with those expectations about performance that you, average pleb, probably don't have. And, it's a double-edged sword. It is what it is. So.
Dude, I'll say as I've always said, but maybe people on this show don't remember because that might have just been Thorin's thoughts here. I always gave this example, Monty. The reason why no fan can ever understand what it's like, and they all get mad as fuck, by the way, because they're all so insecure, by the way, even though they think we're the one insecure ones. If you dare point out, Monty, maybe a guy who only has 100 followers on Twitter doesn't know what it's like to have 100,000. They go, oh, it's a follow account, so all that matters. In that context, yes, by definition, literally, you fucking idiot, think it through. Because the point is this, right? You know when people try to say, you must love this, mate, when people try to say that me and Richard Lewis are like the most thin-skinned people in esports, it's like, motherfucker, if you lived a day in my life, you'd quit. I've had people who are like in my mutuals who, no joke, message me, Monty, and say, I appreciate the retweet, but please don't retweet my tweets because when you do that, I get all your followers and people who are in your, just come and give me abuse. Now, not as in like they're my followers, as in like just people who happen to follow me on Twitter. Because guess what? Just pressing follow doesn't mean you actually like the person. I don't know why anyone ever made that like ridiculous conceit. So basically, I've always given this example, right? That like if I was walking down the street and a guy just said, hey, dickhead, I wouldn't even look around. I'd just keep walking. But if I walked down the street and it was like that episode of fucking Game of Thrones where Cersei came out of like that fucking religious place and a million people were like, dickhead, fuck you, right in my face, 1,000 people, it'd probably get to me. Because you know what? I'm a human and you've never experienced that if you're a guy with 100 followers. You never had that.
Here's the literary analogy, right? Like Gulliver's Travels, Gulliver, the character from Jonathan Swift, goes to the island of the Lilliputians. And it turns out enough tiny people with spears, even though one of them can't do jack shit to you, enough of them can stab you to death or tie you down and capture you, right? If there's thousands of them. So that's what it's like. And it's not about being thin-skinned. It's like there's just an overwhelming amount of abuse that occurs.
They also haven't thought through this obvious angle, Monty. If you have like hundreds and hundreds of comments coming in every day, you're not going to get one that's like a bozo comment and go, what did he really mean by that though? What context? And was he being too harsh? And should I reflect that? You're just going to go, no, I always say it's 2 clicks. Here's the joke. The other one they always do, Monty, is the projection where they go, aha, rent free, I live in your head. You're still talking about it like it was 5 touchdowns at Podunk High 10 years later. I did 2 clicks and you're on. I should have a fucking commercial or something. It's like, click, click, and you're out. It's unreal, isn't it? You literally don't exist for me anymore. You're done. It's out.
Yeah, that's what's so funny. You know, I usually mute people instead of blocking them because I find it more amusing knowing that they're just screaming into some sort of void that I cannot see. And if they continue to like get traction in my mentions, because, you know, you still see it, like you can't see their reply, but you can see the reply to the reply, then I'll block them so they just go away forever. But yeah, it is really amusing. We're like, I'm just not in the mood for this today. Goodbye. It's like it doesn't do anything to my life. I never think about that person again. All right.
And also, like the one last thing I'll say is this. You know the classic one where they go, you're creating an echo chamber. I don't, by the way, by definition, true in some sense. But here's the thing. It's actually good to create echo chambers. Have you not thought of this? By the way, anyone who says it's bad to create an echo chamber, you are literally the most absolutist free speech activist of all time. You believe no one should ever, under any circumstance, be punished for speech by your logic. Otherwise, you're creating an echo chamber. Now, imagine saying that to someone, by the way, who's getting like racist comments. Well, don't block them. Don't make an echo chamber. I noticed, by the way, they also, my favorite, by the way, and I'll just say this right now, I love it when women who work in the industry and are like, consider themselves like, you know, political activists, dare to say that if you block people, you're weak. Think about the fucking pretext you're setting up there, you idiot. That would make any woman who blocks all the people being horrible to her weak person for doing that. You haven't thought that one through. You haven't thought of the precedent on that one. It doesn't make sense. You've got to have a universal policy.
Yeah, given what I've seen in this industry, I think that I would hope at least that many of the female people have extensive block lists.
Everyone should have block lists, mate. It's your best friend. There we go. Right, let's bring the guest on.
All right, let's go to Wolf. We'll be back in a couple minutes, guys. All right, we're back with my old friend, Proxy Wolf, casting with me across many games. Now he's in League of Legends. We've talked about this before. He's the only analyst, at least in the English-speaking world, who's done 3 different major genres, MOBA, RTS, and FPS, at the top professional level. He has joined League of Legends.
To be on LEC then, to be fair. He's not even a US challenger, is he?
So he graciously agreed to be on the show at 3 a.m. Korean time because we have to talk about the T1 coaching changes and basically the state of teams. Nongshim, obviously a huge surprise so far this split, so there's actually lots to deconstruct considering we haven't talked about LCK at all. I watched a ton of LCK games this last week, so we're in a good place to discuss that. But first, Wolf, I don't know if you caught the start. Now, I didn't want to engage you in the caster co-streaming larger discussion, but I know 100% you have some take on this issue and like the guests that are being brought on the broadcasts and people's ability to like co-stream different regions, but not if you're a caster, etc.
I think it's totally fine to have guests on from time to time, especially if you're going to be putting them on the desk, because that's when they can really showcase their personality. Like if you're a streamer or an entertainer foremost, more than you are a caster or an analyst of the game or like really a pundit of the sport, basically, I think putting you on the desk is like, it's fun because you have the opportunity to say like what your thoughts are going to a match, like what you want to see, because you're not really biased, because you're not really attached to the league, right? You could even come in if you're a personality as a fan and say, oh, I'd really like to see Fnatic do well here tonight because I've always been a big supporter of them. You know, there's a lot you can do with a personality on a desk. If you make them a caster, if the people that person is going to be casting with are very close with the person, I think you can actually add a lot to the broadcast because they know each other very well. They can bounce the ideas off each other. They know how to use this person very well, even though they're not a professional broadcaster. But I find that in the rare times I've been kind of asked to cast with an influencer, or when I've seen other people cast with an influencer, oftentimes me as the person who's being asked to do this feels like a little bit awkward. Like, how do I bring this person in? Especially if you're putting them into like a tri-cast, for example. It feels like, well, I had my own ideas about how I want to cast a series, but now this series is no longer about me, or it's no longer about the teams. It's about this guest, right? This is no longer about like the ideas I want to put forward, the narratives I wanted to tell, or the narratives we've been building up over the last few weeks. It's just kind of like somebody's here and it's kind of about them now. So I feel like you lose a lot of the broadcast that way. A lot of people asked me what I thought about this, the LEC guests, obviously, and I basically said, like, if someone ever asked me, like, would you want to bring an influencer on to the LCK because it'd be good for viewership, I would just say, no, why don't they just go on another co-stream and, like, build that viewership, which is also still good for us. Because I think the mainstream should always be about, I mean, the reason why casters exist, the reason why color casters especially exist, is to tell people about the game, teach them about what's happening, yes, but also tell the story of not just that one moment, but like continued story of the league. And when you bring in a guest of any kind, even if it's a co-streamer, a streamer, or even a caster from another region, you still kind of miss something, right? Like if I guest cast the LEC, there'd be a lot missing, right? Even though I'm a League of Legends analyst and a commentator by trade, I'd be missing a lot because I'm not as familiar with that region, right? It doesn't mean that like you can't have cast from other regions, cast, you know, players from other regions like at Worlds, for example, but I think it's always important to have an expert of the region on the broadcast at all times, and I think that should be the focus, even when you have a guest. That's just my personal take.
Yeah, you could even, by the way, just obviously, if you wanted to make this even less of like a controversial topic, you could just have a second stream. You could have the normal stream, and then you could have a second stream where, like, the obvious one in this case, by the way, would be you'd have like quick shot on this guy or something. Someone who's super experienced. He's going to sort of just handle you, make sure you go in the right direction. But that way, there's literally no downside that you get a separate aspect of viewership, which are obviously cool with cause of core streaming, and there's no danger. You don't actually lose the main broadcast. Like, I don't even see where they haven't thought of that.
Yeah, and I know
I do. It's because they want to pump up the main broadcast viewership, isn't it? So I know the cynical reason, of course. Yeah.
I also, I know, Wolf, you out of, I think, all casters are like the most. I mean, many casters are very dead set on like telling the history and the story of players. But you as a color commentator, that's like. You do that more than anyone else, basically. So, I mean, I'm sure you have very strong opinions about that aspect of it when it comes to coming to these broadcasts, because that to me is what hooks people in. The human narratives and understanding the backgrounds and kind of the trajectories of these players are the storylines that keep people coming back to watch professional matches. That's the difference between watching somebody stream where you learn a few tips and tricks and watching a league week after week after week.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people would say if it's, in a 10-person round robin format, that if you're casting number 9 versus number 10, why do you care about the story? Like, it doesn't matter. These teams aren't going to playoffs, right? But I think it's, if you're an analyst or even the play-by-play caster to a certain extent, if you can't tell that story and make it interesting and make it worthwhile to people watching that 9 versus 10, like, then like, should you be a caster? Like, I mean, I don't want to go like that deep and say you should quit or anything like that, but like, I think that some people would just say, well, just make it fun, and just have a goofy cast and like maybe bring a guest on, and like, is the funnier it is, the better. And sometimes I think that's true, but I think you have to remember that there are 10 people on Summoner's Rift who this is about, right? And like, their personalities and their stories matter, and how tragic it is for them. I mean, DRX in the LCK right now is the best example of this. Like, we haven't gone too deep into some of these new players' stories just yet because we're kind of feeling out where they are, but we're not going to meme them, right? We're not going to just go, well, it's a DRX match and they're not going to playoffs, so like, let's just do something else. I think telling that story is still important no matter what. And I think my take is, rather than make it silly, I think sometimes making it emotional, making it something that people care about, is something that's going to be better for the longevity of the league.
So let's talk about the T1 stuff now, because part of how this all ties in terms of player history and player storylines is that you are actually the perfect person to discuss all of this, because all of these people are from StarCraft, which you used to cast. So if we talk about your knowledge of kind of player history, well, turns out that Polt, the current GM of T1, is coming in from StarCraft. We have some, previous people like Zephyr, who have playing histories in League of Legends, who then transitioned into coaches. We even have current players on the roster who are related to StarCraft, like Gumayushi is the younger brother of Innovation, which is like one of the coolest stories I think that's ongoing in esports if you care about esports history. And now Stardust is the new interim coach, who is also coming from StarCraft. So for those people who don't know the whole circumstance, because this all ties into the circus that was the LS, preseason coaching fiasco, how Danny and Zephyr got in charge of this team, Polt as the GM selecting everybody, now these other StarCraft players who are now coaches from the academy team coming up to represent the current team. So why don't you weave us a tale of this year in T1 and how we got to this point?
So there was obviously the start of things was there were a lot of rumors that LS was going to be the coach, right? That's kind of where we started the year off, and in like the end of the off season was kind of pointing towards that. And then there was the leak, right? There was a leak from, I don't remember who it was. It might have been one of the players was about to leave the team. It was on Discord, that leak that LS was joining and Polt was joining. And so there was a lot of backlash, right? LS ended up not becoming the coach. He took a little bit of a break. Then he kind of announced he's a streamer for T1. He's going to be doing co-streams and stuff like that. Polt joined the team, it was announced. And then shortly afterwards, they announced Danny coming in with Zephyr. And that was like the big moment of like, okay, it was going to be else. Everyone's mad. And then now we have top coaches and you're getting some down one key of power in here. So I felt like, okay, we spent the big money last second, right before the season starts. We got the good stuff, so don't worry. That's kind of how the season started. And then, as everybody knows, T1 has a maximum player roster. So they have actually the full limit of players, which I believe is 10 for an LCK roster. So they have, basically every player has a double, except the jungle, which has 2, and Keria does not. Keria does not have a support. He does now. It was announced today that they're bringing up Hoyt, actually from the Challengers roster, so he'll be now Keria's substitute.
By the way, how do you like that? How do you like being any of those other players, including Faker? And they're like, listen, if you play bad, there's a sob. And then Keria's like, what about me? And they're like, just play well. Like, I'm the best. I am the best. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, what's that situation? Why does we not one for everyone?
Yeah.
I'll get to my take.
Is the best player on that team, but anyway,
I'll get to my take on why Hoyt might come up later. But anyway, so that's kind of the story has been that there's a lot of players, right, and there's a lot of shuffling. And throughout spring, there were some struggles. They weren't dominant. They actually had a pretty bad record at the beginning. So Danny, actually, I guess I should preface this by explaining that when there's a head coach in Korea, it means that you're basically the boss, you're the manager. What you do with that power is actually up to you, and lots of different teams do different things. But when you're the head coach, you're usually not on the day-to-day. You're not actually looking at the drafts. You're not the guy who's on stage. You're not the guy who's got the clipboard, right? Like, that's not
you're the GM.
You're like above that guy. You're the GM, essentially. And sometimes you don't act as it, but...
Here's the funny thing. Like, because the head coach is basically what we would term as a GM in the West, I don't actually know what Polt's job is in a Korean team, being the GM, when the head coach is basically the GM in a Korean context.
So my take, because that part is like a little bit murky from the outside looking in, I don't even know, but my take is that Polt is kind of like, he's overseeing some decisions as a traditional GM, but he's also kind of like the face of the team in terms of PR decisions. And the reason I say that is because he was the one who went to the press conference and actually answered the questions when the coaching staff change was made. So he did kind of act as a GM in that sense. But what I'm trying to say here is there's a big distinction between Zephyr and Danny. And Danny has been kind of the face of the team. And because he's on stage, he's the one who's doing the drafts, he's the one who's doing the player swaps, and he's been very public about this. And what's really interesting about Danny is that he's been, I think, the most transparent coach, whether if he's telling the truth in fact, that we have ever seen in like Korean League of Legends or maybe even Korean esports. He's doing interviews every week, sometimes multiple times a week, talking about why he's made his swaps or what's going on in scrims or why he thinks the players are having problems. And while some of it might just be PR speak and not true, it's been amazing for me as a caster because I've been able to say, well, he said this and they did this. And then next week he said this and he said they were going to do this, but then they didn't do it. So what's true? Like, it's been really interesting to have that as a caster where you can actually literally have quotes from a coach and bring that up, because oftentimes you're just kind of going on hearsay or speculation or your personal opinion on your analysis on the game. But at the very end of Danny's time, after doing a billion roster swaps, he said, this is the roster. Then he used the roster they used for spring playoffs. And then he made a few changes between Teddy and Gumayusi there at the very end. And he basically said the players are not doing what we talked about in scrims. We're talking about decision-making problems on the Rift, where there's a lot of problems of indecisiveness, shot calls aren't being followed. And we know this is a problem, and we've addressed it. It's working in scrims. But when we go to our professional games, it isn't really happening so much. And that was kind of like the last few things he said publicly about where the team was. And then suddenly, just like out of nowhere, right when they're in the middle of the roster, I wake up one morning and everybody's blowing up my phone, be like, did you see the news? Did you see the terminations? And that's when Stardust got moved into essentially Danny's position. And then Moment came up as his substitute coach.
And by the way, Stardust also a former StarCraft 2 player.
Yes, yep. Stardust was a pretty well-known player who played in both NA and in EU. And he also kind of, just to give you guys the context, he kind of like embraced being an import. Like he was like, I'm going to learn English and I'm going to... Yeah, exactly. Polt is just like this, right? The GM. So they actually are pretty close friends. And he basically embraced like, I'm going to speak English as much as I can. I'm going to, be cool with the Western fans. I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm the Korean guy winning your region, but I also want you to like me. And I'm going to try to interact with you. And Polt went to
university in Texas, I think, too.
Yeah.
So
Polt is actually like super good at English. Like,
yeah,
I'd say much better than Stardust. But anyway, Stardust kind of got moved up, and then you had Moment, who has kind of been going. He's been coaching for a while, bouncing between the Challengers roster for T1 and the regular roster. I think he's pretty much involved in like moving people up and down, and he's kind of like the bottom of the barrel coach, but he is still important. He knows the team in and out. He got moved up one spot behind Stardust. You could see on stage, Stardust was there on stage, but every time the game ends, when you go back into the coaching booth, like it's always Moment who's got like the monitor and he's pointing to things and he's saying this and this and this, right? Can't hear what he's saying, but you could tell he's the one who's like making the decisions. And that's where we are now. So that's kind of like, I guess, the whole timeline from start to finish. Polt did say, I guess, in the GM interview that or the press conference, I should say, where he was speaking on as GM, that he felt like he didn't want to answer questions about how the players felt about the coaching decision, and that he said that they didn't have any plans to get any new coaches at the moment. So basically, like, this is kind of it for now, which was the scariest part of the press conference for me, because I thought this was going to be an interim kind of temporary thing.
Yes.
And he also said, like, please don't bother the players about their thoughts on this. And that was kind of like the gist of the press conference. He also said that the decision was not made while talking to the players.
Thing to say in a press conference as well, like, please, media, don't ask questions of any of the players that get penalized. It's like, oh, sorry, yes, sir. Like, What? Okay.
He did also say he did also say that the decision was made. This is according to Ashley King, by the way. I was not actually at the press conference. I'm just kind of quoting her tweets because she was watching the press conference and was tweeting out about it. He did say that basically it wasn't his decision, or rather it was not with the player's decision that he made this choice, or that the org, including Joe Marsh, which he did specifically mention, made this choice. It was kind of like separate from the players. Said, I thought it would be unprofessional to actually ask the players what they thought directly about it. I'd rather just make the decision separately from them. So that's like all the timeline, all the info. I think I'm not missing any details here.
I heard he just had Jack make the decision 2 months ago, but it just took a while to, come down the pipeline. One of those like vacuum tubes or something.
Yeah, and also like he did say that Joe Marsh did have some input on it. Like the implication was there. That they, at least we can't know if this is Polt, running interference for Joe Marsh, who made the decision, or if at least Joe who is in charge of all of T1's teams. He's the CEO of T1, I believe. Or whether he made the decision and then like Joe approved it. We don't really know.
I'm how people's feelings now, because I don't give a fuck if this guy's the CEO. The whole premise of why he was supposed to be exempt from all the LS criticism was that he's just the American guy and the Koreans handle it all. But now all of a sudden he's making decisions. By the way, what qualifications does he have to know if someone's a good coach or not? Now, true, Polt could tell you, I don't think he's doing a good job, in which case, by the way, effectively Polt made the decision, you just signed off on it. So I'm done with PR speak, by the way, in esports. Like, I'm not in esports industry. I just work in the games, and just you can't get rid of me. So there's all you need to know about that.
That's fair. But what was so interesting is that to go back to rewind time a little bit and why this situation seems so ridiculous now, and why, Wolf, you and I were discussing this on Twitter, is that the premise that they set up themselves with the 10-player roster in spring was that, oh, this is a long-term, this is a long-term project. We're swapping people out, even though it's pretty obvious, like, which is the group of the 5 best players that should be playing, because we're playing the long game. So to not even finish the season, if you're playing the long game, just destroys all of the fucking bullshit that they said earlier, because as management, now the coaches may have still been invested in playing that long game, right? But if you as management sign on to that plan, you have to see it through. You don't come when there's like, you've already played 10 matches in the summer split. It's right before you go to Worlds. You've only got, 4 or 5 weeks left of LCK. And you say, no, now basically we're bringing up these coaches that have no or very little rapport with our current players. You have to look at T1 as effectively being a player-run team and a player-coach team at this point in time. Yeah. And people will look at it and they'll say, oh, well, they won both of their matches after doing that, which obviously we will be discussing. And they did look better. This is true. But it doesn't make sense from a managerial perspective as to why you empower these coaches' decisions and then destroy them at the last possible minute. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the best choice, even though they won their matches this past week.
Yeah, and I think before we get into that, I will say, like, it's really easy to use, like, this, like, weird sort of confirmation bias if you were a big proponent of getting rid of these coaches, to look at just 2 best of 3s in 1 week of League of Legends. In a very tumultuous time, by the way, in LCK history,
and they
where
should have probably lost the Dom one, by the way. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit, but it does seem to be, to me, and I said as much, when I responded to your tweet, Monty, that and you just said the same thing, is that the players will kind of run this team for the rest of the season. We'll see what happens. Now, when I made that tweet, I didn't know that Polt was going to say, a few hours later that they are not planning on getting any new coaches, which I guess on one hand, like, I kind of like, maybe, and now that I think about it more,
call.
because if you try to bring in a new coach right now, then you're starting to put this plan into motion, in this long-term idea. There is no long-term. There's not enough time. We're past the halfway point of the season. And then there's going to be a Worlds Gauntlet that you're going to have to fight through, because I don't think T1 is going to win LCK. That seems very unlikely. It is entirely possible, but very unlikely. So you have to go through the Gauntlet, then you have to go through Worlds. So, like, there's not enough time to actually set that up, and to put Stardust in a position.
You would have to be insane to come in as an outside of the
Yeah.
organization coach at this point in time, because the expectations are huge and you have to undo all of this damage that we were talking about in the spring as to why are they doing this in the first place? And you're dealing with the most decorated player of all time in Faker and trying to win his approval with a few weeks remaining in the season. This is a coaching suicide mission.
People would do it though. People
There's
would
only
want
one.
to, if they
There's
didn't
only
go.
one
Let's be real.
person. There's only one person in that team house. Well, there's literally one person in that team house since the coach is terminated, who actually has the experience and the knowledge to lead this team to an LCK finals, maybe a title, and Worlds.
Is it
And that person
Faker?
is Faker. It's
There you
Faker,
go.
right? He's the only person, right? And he has enough experience to, and I think he's matured a lot as a player and just as a person over the years. I mean, you could tell it in his interviews. He is the person who could lead this team. And we call this, there's a term for this in Korea called playing coach, which exists outside of Korea too, but it's pretty rare, where you actually coach while you play. Runner was one of the more famous ones in Overwatch, for example. It's very briefly only a player while he was coaching. It is possible that he kind of takes over the team, and then Stardust and Moment are kind of like his coaching staff, right? Like that might actually be something that happens behind the scenes. We can't assume that, but I think that he will kind of de facto become, whether he wants to or not, the leader during this time, because
Absolutely.
Stardust has not actually done anything of great merit as a LoL coach yet, right? He's played, on big stages in StarCraft 2. He's won titles, but he hasn't actually coached a 5-man League of Legends roster. Now, he knows a lot of the inner workings of the team because he's been here for, the majority of this year, but that doesn't mean that necessarily he can step into, Danny's shoes in terms of drafting, coaching Zephyr in terms of leadership, and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to get this team to a championship, right? And I mentioned on the cast, but it was kind of hilarious that at that intense moment where they faced Damwon Kia, Koma's like got his arms folded on the other side, like looking across, going like, "What happened to T1?" It seems everything's in a little bit of disarray. But I did not have faith, and I still don't have faith that they will be able to do it. Moment and Stardust right now, but you can't get a new coach, and it felt like ripping these coaches out right now, like right when they were on the cusp of success. I think feels like, even though it's been almost a year since, or almost 2 seasons, right? 2 seasons being the year of League of Legends. It's been almost a competitive year of League of Legends. I think it was like too soon to actually pull them away there, because you have to like go all in on this. If your whole plan for the whole year is like, okay, we're going to use this 10-man roster, we're going to experiment, we're going to get the perfect final roster with some tweaks, right? To Gumushi and Teddy kind of swapping around. Who knows if Owner coming in for jungle was even something on the cards. It could have been on the cards before the coaching swap, even though we only saw it afterwards. Like, they
could have been scrimming with him all week and had every intention of putting him in.
Exactly. To stop it like right there, I think is just, it's such an insane risk. And yeah, it might work out, and they might go to Worlds, and everyone will be like, well, I guess it was the right choice after all, even though that might not necessarily be the case. But knowing what we knew, out from the outside looking in, at that point, it felt like the craziest decision that anyone has made all year.
Yeah, and to those people who are looking at the results, I think if you actually, they'll be like, oh yeah, and then they beat reigning world champions Damwon, and it's like, sure, they did. I think Damwon overall obviously had a rough week, losing to both T1 and Nongshim. Also, it's a very hard week. They were facing 2 of the other top 4 teams in the league back to back. So, there's that preparation angle to think about before. They didn't know what T1 was going to look like without the coaches, and with these roster swaps that were coming through, with Owner all of a sudden being in the lineup, Gumushi all of a sudden being in the lineup, right? So there were pretty, I think, large issues there that Damwon was facing. And also, if you actually watch the games, it probably should have been a 2-0 to Damwon, because that second game, T1 tried really hard to throw that game, like really, really, really hard. There were a lot of mistakes that were made. Damwon had a ton of opportunities to get back into that game. T1 should not fill you with confidence if you watched game 2 of that series. Yes, they dominated game 3.
Yeah, not to mention that game 3 was also kind of a farce, right? Because it was such an early lead, because Ghost and Barrel messed up the laning phase so badly.
Yes.
That like game 3, who knows what could have happened if Damwon wasn't playing with like one hand behind their back and a blindfold on. So we don't know.
Well, it's kind of Damwon right now in a nutshell, because Ghost and Barrel are kind of routinely bad, and they're still doing relatively well despite having these basically dragging an enormous amount of dead weight in the bottom lane. We'll talk about Dom 1.
That's because the league fucking sucks, but sorry, Wolf, you are here, but it's not in a very good shape at the moment at the top.
It's not.
It's not. It just isn't, is it?
Not going to disagree. Not going to disagree.
We'll talk about Nongshim, but it's probably not a great thing that a lifelong substitute in Gory is suddenly having a good performance in his first split as a starter in LCK. That's probably not what we want to see. So either we have to believe that he's taken like a giant leap forward all of a sudden in his career, or I prefer to apply Occam's razor in this situation, which is to say probably the competition isn't amazing right now.
And I'll just throw this out there. As someone who's watched Peanut's whole career, just wait for playoffs. Just wait. Listen, he's awesome in the club. Sometimes has problems performing when he gets back to the crib, if you know what I mean. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. There you go. I kept it PG for you, Wolf. I didn't go too deep there. Because it's the one thing people don't know that I actually genuinely didn't think of when we first used to do something in Insight back in the old days. Right? All I'll say, I'll even have to be careful how I say this now, Wolf. I used to literally, because remember, I was just some guy living in fucking UK who didn't know anything about this stuff. And the world was a bit different. I used to literally just bring people on who were from certain Asian countries that certain other Asian countries don't actually even acknowledge exist and joke with them about that fact on broadcast. Like, I never actually thought to myself, this could possibly impact someone's life. So I won't go too hard. We won't make it awkward for you when you go back to LCK.
I appreciate it.
There you go.
It is a tumultuous time. Like I was saying, it's a very volatile time for LCK. I don't think we're the best region, and at the moment, I don't think we're going to win Worlds. Whether we go to the finals or anything like that, I think it's still up in the air. Like, we just have to see how the group stage goes. Like, those conversations I don't think can happen now, and I don't think they'll happen at the end of LCK either. I think we really have to wait and see how the group stage of the World Championship goes before we can start to make those sorts of assertions. But I do think we could say with certainty that like LPL look to be the favorites right now, even though their region.
Here's what's depressing.
Their region is also in disarray right now. To be fair.
Sure. That's depressing to me though, dude. It's not just that there's no like elite Korean team, because that one hasn't really got this shit together yet, so we can't really know if they actually are good. And obviously you can't discount that they did lose Nagori. But the bigger issue for me is this: of all the years that Korea had to have 4 slots, really? Because, by the way, the 4th slot is just setting this up so that some dumbass Western team is just going to get to beat some Korean team and get out the group. It's like I can see the script being written here at this point in time, Wolf. Like, all those years, by the way, if you'd gone back in time like 7 years, you give them 4 slots, they could have had the top 4 of the fucking tournament. This is what going to be the year where like 2 Korean teams don't even get out of groups. Just wait and see. Because there's going to be some bullshit like Nongshim and fucking Uno. God only, let's just hope not like Afrika Freaks or something, because it's just not happening, boys. It's over.
It is depressing.
Because remember, that was all Korea had left. All Korea still had left was, right, in theory, the best team could just be the best in the world, though. It's a black box. You don't quite know because they're not playing LPL. But maybe, like that one did last year, maybe the best team goes there, but they're just actually low-key the best anyway, and they win. At the moment, they don't really have that, unfortunately. Like the very fact that Gen G leads the league is a bit depressing, because Gen G is the team that is like, they're not as bad as Peanut, but they are, surprisingly enough, they are the team that's just like, oh, anyone worse than us, haha, you peasant. And then they're like, oh, yes, my master, to everyone who they think's better than them. Like, they can't ever beat anyone who's slightly above them, can they?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting one for sure. Like, just to let everyone know, too, because there has been some questions about this, and I think we mentioned it once on broadcast, but I don't know if we've ever, like, officially said it. So for those watching, the gauntlet this year is going to be a little bit different. So... it's still going to be played out the same way, where one team wins the gauntlet, but the team that wins the finals will go directly to the group stage, and the team that loses will go to play-ins. So that's how I think most people would have expected that it's going to go, but just so you guys know, that's how it's going to be. So 3 teams will go to the group stage, and 1 team will be in play-ins. So the 4th Korean seed also gets to kind of like potentially just like bash a bunch of weaker teams. And that's kind of been a running joke with us here in the LCK, is that like if Chovy goes to the play-in stage, how he's
I want to watch that, actually. I'm a sadist, so I want to watch that.
We haven't even talked about the fact that legitimately, I mean, he's had a couple of bad games this split, but in theory, the best player in the world this year actually might not even be going to Worlds. That's real. even though we just said the top of the league's weak.
Yeah.
Tell you what, there's a lot of GMs doing some interesting work in League of Legends, isn't there? There's a lot of them.
It's even
an
more
interesting
depressing
time.
when you think about Chovy's kind of career options prior to this year and how he ended up on Hanwha Life.
It's because
Oh,
I've
boy.
basically heard, like, the gist I heard behind the scenes is he's one of those people where I think it might even be like a family member of his who is his like agent or something. And it's one of those ones where like a lot of people will know this from the Korean scene. Oftentimes you have like a handler who negotiates like your deals, or if you go to the West, for example, sometimes the player doesn't even, it might not even be the one who chooses. They might just make a deal with a bunch of people, go, oh, I've got you this deal, I've got you like X million, you with this team, and then you're like, oh, okay, what's the roster? And then you find out that it's like the RX last year, and then this team now, like semi-depressing, and it's like just players who like haven't made it, and some of them never will. I'll tell you right now.
I think that when we go back to the T1 conversation, like this decision, it could be the best decision ever, but it could also be very disastrous. And I think to assume just based on 2 best of 3s for T1 that they won, one against KT, who's trending massively downward right now compared to where they started at the beginning of the season, and against Damwon, who's still trying to figure this meta out right now with a bot lane that literally gave away the 3rd game for free. I think we shouldn't get too excited yet. I mean, the one thing we can say just from the outside looking into of the players is that the players look a lot happier than they did before. Like, that's one thing that I've noticed right away. Now, maybe that's not related. Maybe it's just because they won 2 best of 3s in a row. The players look happier. Fakers looked happier. So something changed. I guess we won't necessarily know what it is, but was it the right decision in hindsight? Like, we don't know that yet. And I don't know, like, that might be something we talk about, like, 4 or 5 months from now, and we go, do we know yet? Like, I think it's hard because, it's going to be a tumultuous offseason as well for T1, regardless of what happens. Like, say they don't even go to Worlds. They have a ton of time. How much of this team do they rebuild? This is an insanely expensive roster, by the way. One of the most expensive rosters when you think about it. They're basically hoarding all of the talent. Like, if you could actually take each one substitute and
They don't
slot
be
it
on other
into,
teams for sure. Yeah.
exactly. If you could take one sub and like slot it into like each of the like mid-tier teams, the LCK as a region would be like way stronger actually, in fact.
For sure.
And so like how T1 have to make their decisions for next year based on performances that might be misjudged by higher ups because they might think they made the right decision by removing the coaches, or thought, okay, well, this is just going to be interim, even though publicly have said it's not. And then next year, how do you rebuild this roster going into 2022? Like, how many of these players do you trade or sell, or how many do you keep? And then which coaching staff are you going to get? And with all the criticisms from the fans all year long, like, who wants to join? You might have the big bag to throw to say, hey, come and join T1, but like, I might go, well, you know what? I think I'm good. Kesman might be like, you know what? I think I'll stick with Hanwha. Like, money's pretty good here, and you know what? I'm pretty happy with my results, and I don't actually need to deal with all the drama and the crazy PR that comes with it. I think it's going to be a really tumultuous time in the offseason just in general for Korea, with all the players that are getting older right now, might want to consider retiring, some that have to go to the military coming up. It's going to be crazy. Like, wait until after Worlds. It is going to be, I think, one of the biggest off seasons for LCK of all time in terms of shifts and craziness.
I mean, it's also just crazy right now. Like, I can't remember another season of League of Legends where globally we've had this many just like really weird, like mid-season benchings, coach firings, player removals, player trades. It's been a really weird year overall, and T1 obviously was doing this very early in the season, much earlier than many of the LCS and LEC teams, especially LCS teams, obviously, that have engaged in these practices recently. But yeah, I mean, it just seems like the overall GMing in Korea doesn't make a lot of sense because the good players are spread out in the teams in a very awkward way. That isn't making the region as a whole strong, and even that isn't even making the players on those teams strong. And the construction of some of these rosters is just puzzling. And I don't know if there's a way to make T1 better, because you always have to build around Faker. Like, until Faker decides to go to the military or has to go to the military and retire, there's not a way to make T1 in a way that's different than the way it's made now.
I also think, by the way, this is an example of where, like, once a meta gets established, even in like how you do business, because this is one of the things in Counter-Strike where we don't change the meta of the game as drastically. I always said there's a meta in how people recruit players, though, because what you tend to do is if you're like the fourth best team and you always lose to the number one team, you look at how they built their team and you see, right, I need to recruit someone specifically so we beat them, right? If you look at the last few years, they had that like almost like a second golden generation in Korea of the Griffin and Damwon players all come through, all like within a split or two, competing for the title, going to Worlds. So that makes me wonder if they had a similar problem to what I think's happened in like LEC, which is they thought, oh, it's just all about getting the new hot rookie. Just get all the rookies, get every rookie you can in here. And it's like, there's a reason why like veteran players still play this game at a very high level. Like there's a certain experience level, especially by the way, if you want them to be on a team like a T1, these massive organizations. Like it's different if you come up together as a team that's a no-name team with no pressure and you're just really good. Like, mate, that's like the perfect way to do it. If you get thrown onto T1, there's a lot of people who just break instantly. Like the mental pressure of all the like that's in that scenario. By the way, if it fails, you're the one who fucked up on T1. Everyone else won in the history and was in the finals. Like you're the only loser who didn't. So, mate, I think people are really underestimating that. Like it doesn't matter how good you are in solo queue. Not all these rookies are going to make it. And in T1's case, it's even more ridiculous because, as we alluded to, in spring they were running the all rookie lineup, or like all like newer players rather. Like that was ridiculous to me. Like they never even gave that team a chance because they would run in like one game with all of them, then they'd swap one player out, then they'd swap a different player out. It's like the maddest like ship of Theseus approach to making a fucking team I've ever seen. Like it was the opposite of A/B testing because they never actually tested any of the fucking pieces at the same time. You actually had no clue at the end of the split, no joke. No. With the exception of Gumeyashi, you had no clue even if the other players were good. You were like, is he? But he might have been. But I think he had the one game, but was that against a bad team? Or like there was like only one play at the end that you actually knew was legit.
Yeah, it's really interesting because with T1 taking all these players, like it removes competition from them as well. So like what T1 has done is extremely intelligent because you have all the potential, right? You're like, oh, if this guy suddenly pops off, we got him. He wears the T1 stripes, right? You've also denied that player from playing against you as well. It's an extremely expensive strategy, but it's a really good one. But it's one that we've never really seen in Korea before because for the first time, I think like I want to say ever, in terms of like Korean esports, players are willing to say, I want to be on this team and get paid this money, and I want it so badly, I'll sit on the bench. And that's like never really been very common. Usually rookies who are up and coming are like, I want to be on this team. I trust this team. I did tryouts with this team. I like this team. And sometimes teams would pay a little bit less, but the player would be like, I think I have a better chance of winning on this team, so I want to be on this team. You know, or you know, if you look back at some of the top LCK teams over the years, especially you know, if you go back like 6 or 7 years ago, some of those players were paid very little before they ended up traveling, right? And now we've evolved to this point so much where it's like about the prestige of the team. How much does that do for your streaming? How much does that do for your brand? Like actually being a part of T1, for example, is one of the biggest things you could ever do as a player in any game. I mean, they've exploded into like tons of scenes, right? Like that roster is legendary because of the SK Telecom T1 days. And sometimes I think you're willing to make sacrifices in terms of like what you might become and like how you do this year. And maybe will you go to Worlds and will you play on stage when you can say, I'm part of T1. I was part of T1. I got paid this huge salary. And if they never play me and I retire when they end of my contract, I made bank and I can go stream and I have the T1 name behind me, so I've grown. Like that's not true of just T1 but you know, it's outside of Korea, it's a lot of teams, right? But esports has grown so quickly and the money has grown so quickly and streaming has grown so quickly that I think part of like what Monty and you were talking about, Thorin, about how these rosters are built, and it seems like it kind of doesn't really make sense. The players aren't utilized correctly. Might just be because teams are going, well, I want to get Deft, and we have to use the bag, and we'll get Chovy, but like, there's not really a whole lot left, so that's what we're gonna go with. And like, in the old days, if you told Chovy and Deft like, hey, Chovy and Deft, like, you put them on 3-way call, and you're like, all right, we're gonna hire you. Like, oh, Hanwha, big company, yeah, I'm down. Who else is on the team? They're like, well, how about like we're looking at this Johan guy, and there's Morgan. They're gonna be like, yeah, anybody else? Yeah, Dudu, it could be a sub. They're gonna be like, in the old days, I'd be like, I don't know about that. Like, can we build a different team? If you build a different team around me, I'll join. But nowadays
By the
it's
way,
like,
if your name in the
how
game
much?
is
Okay, I'll be
doo-doo,
there. You know.
you better be fucking amazing at the game. You better be like 5 times better than anyone else because the jokes write themselves. No, the problem with that is like, I think you've got probably a good point that I hadn't considered, Wolf, which is like, it is true. They only have so much budget to spend. And the players you're listing, Deft, these guys can go to LPL again. Or they can go to the LCS team or something for millions, you know.
Exactly. And here's the thing. If you were going to sell out previously, you would sell out in China. You wouldn't sell out in Korea. The players who stuck around Korea were the ones who said, I want to win, right?
Yes.
I want to win. I want to be a champion. And then later I will sell out to China. This is before LPL started winning the championships, right? But the players who were serious about continuing to win were the ones staying in Korea for reduced salaries.
Sure.
And I think that like before you would not make that choice as Chovy or Deft if you didn't think the team was going to win. And I think somewhere along the way, like the mentality has changed where you're kind of like, especially with franchising coming in, so much money is coming into the league right now. Esports has grown up so much that you're kind of like, I'm a professional player. I'll get paid a salary, and like we'll see how it goes for some players, right? I'm not trying to imply that Deft is like this, by the way. I'm just saying this is a pure example of okay, what might one player be thinking going into a roster like this that I think is kind of one of the ones we're thinking about.
Deft is like this.
Okay, I'm not gonna. I wasn't gonna say directly. I'm just saying like I just want to use him as an example because Hanwha Life Esports is one of those teams though that feels poorly constructed because you have some of the pieces, but not all of it. It'd be like if you're trying to, I don't know, build a hotel, but like some floors were missing. You're like, well, how do I get to the fifth floor by the stairs if there's like there's holes there, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, there clearly is this idea for a lot of teams and GMs right now is get as much top level talent as we can, and then hopefully we'll develop the rest. But when you don't develop the rest, or you're struggling to develop the rest, so much pressure goes onto those players. The fans are saying, well, we've got Deft and Chovy, but you know, I don't know about this Morgan guy. Or like, oh yeah, like it's looking really good. Peanut played well again. Rich is doing fine, but Bay, I don't know about this guy. You know, Bay, you know, obviously did very poorly and was replaced. But if you get to a certain point where everybody's unhappy, like the top players are unhappy because they're playing with rookies that are also scared of all the pressure because everyone's saying, well, if you could only just be as good as Faker, like this wouldn't happen. And there's a huge Reddit thread and there's 5 memes on Invin, and you're like, damn, like it's really hard to be the rookie, but it's also really hard to be the veteran because you have to help teach these rookies. It's a really tumultuous time. I think it's a really big culture shift that's happening right now in the LCK, and it's just going to take time for it to kind of settle down.
One of the things I find really weird though is like, to me, if you're a Korean, selling out as in just taking the big paycheck and sort of not caring what your teammates are, that premise to me doesn't even make sense for them if they play an LCK though. Because here's the thing, if you go to LPL, like I guarantee that year when Mata and Dandy were on that dog shit team, Monty, in LPL, and they were like nowhere near, Vici, they were like nowhere near winning the LPL. I guarantee some Koreans were probably like, well, yeah, they just went for the money. Like it wasn't about winning. Like I bet that was accepted, right? Here's the difference. If you play in the LCK and you're like Deft and Chovy, like the players themselves historically would be like mad depressed if they didn't win, no matter who their teammates are, no matter what the level of the team is. Like they aren't just trolling and do PR where they always come out and they're like, you know, I apologize for losing the game. Like they really mean that shit. Like normally players, like if people want to know what strict Korean culture is for like being the best example ever is Edgar, the coach of Gen G. He was on one of the best teams consistently making every LCK final. And then because he lost one to T1, he was like, I apologize and retire immediately. Like, what? You're the second best? Like, what? It's not like you couldn't have won, but like that is like they have like the hyper competitive mentality. So I'm amazed that these guys, like, put it this way, I'm really amazed that like Chovy kept it up this long and hasn't sort of just like fucking broken down or something. I'd expect him to be doing like Paul Belter tweets at this point in time.
That's it's not an inaccurate sentiment, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy like how competitive Korea has always been and how being the best and winning has always been, you know, the most important thing for a lot of people. But I think that's especially now that like winning LCK doesn't mean you're expected to win Worlds. Like that's an expectation, I think, for some people and people who are really hopeful, and some people who are, you know, not gripped in reality always, who think like, well, Korea is still the best no matter what, just because it is, and like they got lucky that one time, and like the coin flip with RNG, and you know. But I think like some people just have not grasped the reality of like if you win the #1 seed for LCK, you're not going to win default World. It's not like we're never going to go back to a time, in my opinion, unless something drastically changed. Right now, it's ridiculous to assume that we're going to go back to a time where it's like, okay, Korea versus Korea finals is happening on the reg, where extreme Korean dominance. Like the rest of the world has just gotten better, and you can't just suddenly get better than the rest of the world again. Like
it would take like the Chinese government blocking the immigration of Korean players to China. That's what it would take.
Impossible though, Monty. That is not impossible. That's not a Twilight Zone episode. There's maybe a world in a few years where that could happen. That's all I'm saying.
That's true.
Also, by the way, like how ridiculous even is that whole premise? Like, man alive. Because I agree, like that, believe it or not, you've actually hit on something there, Wolf, we never discussed on this show, which is because we didn't do any shows from MSI. We actually never got to talk about that scenario. That I actually thought, even though, listen, it was a storm in a teacup, it wasn't a massive deal. It was like a scheduling thing, and unfortunately they got the short end of the stick. But to me, the significant thing people missed about that, where Dan One was complaining that they had to play the day before the LPL team played the other semi-final, right? What I thought was whack about that was like, how far has Korea fallen? Korea used to beat you and win the tournament no matter what the circumstances were. Could be some Western. The idea that they're effectively, it's not that, dude. That's like the Korean version of when Chauster claimed, like, oh, the reason we lost all the games at Worlds is because we only had blue side strats prepared. Like, what are you talking about? Like, are you not actually a good team? So, mate, as soon as they start arguing about stuff like that publicly, I was like, what? Where's your mental? Where's your mental at?
I just think that the fact that Korea is not the best all the time, I think changes some players' mentality. Okay. Especially veterans, right? I think some veterans, and again, I won't name names, but I think some veterans might have looked at, hey, like, if I end up going to Worlds, it means we have to perform no matter what, or like there's going to be memes like you better swim home, and there's always going to be memes, you better swim home if you don't end up going to the finals as a Korean team. That's just kind of a thing, and it's still a thing. But I think that for some players, especially as you get older, you're a veteran. There's a lot of young players that are trying to take your spot. Also, a lot of regions competing with Korea now, like they, way better than they ever have before. I think some players might be more willing to say, "Yeah, I'll take a bag, and I will try to make this team the best it can be, no matter what, as best as I can." But I'm also willing to play with some rookies and take a chance, because no matter what, I'm going to get that big salary that I didn't get when I was a world champion on a team, because Esports wasn't there. And you know what? I'll take it, because if we fail, I still get the money and I can retire.
Franchising brought in bigger sponsors into the LCK that could support higher player salaries than existed when I was casting in Korea, guys. Like, salaries were pretty low outside of like T1, KT, the big name teams. And especially for, famously, Rox Tigers basically didn't, they didn't have any money. Barely had money to live. I can tell you.
Logically, they were probably the most, relative to their era, they were the most underpaid best team in the history of League of Legends. Easy, maybe Esports even.
I was going to say it may be in esports history, frankly, because I can tell you, having personally been to like the T1 offices and like T1 player compound, and then literally going to the Rox Tigers team house, which was 2 tiny rooms filled with bunk beds and a room jammed with computers, and that was it in an apartment building, guys. It was bad. It was bad.
Yeah.
Just because we haven't got that much time, we should probably swap and talk about some other teams before.
Let's talk about Nongshim, because they're the interesting ones, because they're in second place right now. Like I alluded to, they have this new mid laner coming in halfway through the year in Gory, who's been turning a lot of heads. Dokdam has been really good. Also, Wolf, conveniently for you, you've got some more player storytelling to do, because Rich, who was the best player in Heroes of the Storm history, then moved to League of Legends and is now on this team. Is he a great top laner? No,
he's not. I think he's I'd say he's about middle of the pack right now in terms of his laning, maybe even below middle in terms of the laning. Like, I can't speak that highly towards his laning phase. He makes a lot of mistakes. He plays aggressively. He plays as if he's better than the other player, no matter who it is, which I think is actually kind of a gift. I think no matter who he's up against in the top lane, like, he doesn't see the nameplate. He's just like, this is an enemy champion that I will try my best to kill, and I'm better than this, and I'll play this no matter what, sometimes to his detriment. So, usually to his detriment, actually, I'd say, when he does try to make those big plays. But he's calmed down a lot in that regard. But where Rich really excels, which is kind of, where he excelled most in Heroes of the Storm. In Heroes, he did both, but he was the best player so far and above. Like, laning phase is not as much of a thing in Heroes, because you just push on the side lane as Rich. Like, he was the top player, but we also called him off laner. You were the guy who just gets experience because it's shared experience, while the rest of your team fights over objectives, and you're just trying to get as much experience as you can for your team. And then when you go to the team fights in the late game, like, it's not about being fed, because that's not how Heroes works. It's just about actually team fighting perfectly. That was the interesting thing about when you think about Rich and Heroes. He never had advantages ever, except sometimes like a talent tier advantage if MVP Black was like stomping somebody. But he would just go into a team fight and just be better than everybody else. Because in Heroes, there are no items, there are no like inherent advantages. There's no being fed individually. Like you have the same stats as everybody else scaled up. So he did extremely well in those moments. And then in League of Legends, oftentimes from behind on champions that can still engage and still do extremely well with even with limited items, like Gnar, for example, his kit still absolutely works no matter what, even if you're behind. You know, yeah, you're not going to be as survivable, you're not going to do as much damage, but you will get the CC, so the rest of the team can actually clean up. On champions like Gnar, on champions like Gragas, when he was playing Gragas type top, his engages are so phenomenal. It's actually insane to watch how quickly he's transitioned from just being like lane bully, trying to do my thing in the top lane, to like actual great decision making in the late game, good team fighting. His laning phase, I thought, was going to be always his greatest strength, so I worried about him, but he hasn't really gotten out of how he is in lane, but his team fighting has gotten better a lot. But the story of Nongshim this season is really, I feel like, doesn't have anything to do with Rich. It has everything to do with Bay being removed and Gory coming in. Gory's playing very well. And, you know, it is alarming, like you were saying before, how this substitute player who's always just kind of been playing fiddle to people, who's sub to Faker, for example, comes in as absolutely...
most recently on EDG.
Yeah, and he just comes in and starts dumbstering people, solo killing Showmaker. That's been very impressive. And Peanut is like, wait, I can play the game again? I don't actually have to gank? Because Peanut, throughout all of spring season, was ganking every time he came near a lane, because he was just like, I hope I can get these players fed. I hope I can get base somewhere, because if I can't, then I just can't play the game. I can't do anything. I can't accomplish anything. And now that he's got Gory in the mid lane, he can play a lot more passively. He can look for the impactful moments, the important times to gank, instead of just trying to desperately hope that he carries the game. And if he doesn't, he runs it down. He's like, well, you guys are going to lose anyways. It felt like that was often the case for Peanut in spring. And then Duckdom was always great. Kellen was always pretty good. He's improved a lot. And suddenly, this is a team that I feel very comfortable, if we go to Worlds, will perform well. Could be, you know, a team that makes top 8, maybe even top 4. We'll see how it goes. Again, we don't know what the group stages are like in Worlds, so I don't like to make those sort of like, Nongshim was a top 2 team in Worlds. That's a ridiculous thing to say. But I do feel comfortable right now with this team going to Worlds. I would not be disappointed by it. I don't feel worried about sending them like, oh, well, they're just going to flop, or they don't have that much experience yet. I think they're a team that is absolutely world-class right now.
So here's my dousing this in cold water. Like I'm very, even though I agree, like
I knew you were going to, because I could see the furrowed Monty Brown. I'm
no, it's just like
he's gonna be
it's like well, even though I do agree, like Gory's had some good performances, as Thorin alluded to like an hour ago. I am concerned about Peanut's playoff/international performance, which has consistently been an issue. Is that he is a noted choker. The other problem with Gory is like, there's kind of different scenarios that we have to consider here. Yes, he's been a sub to some very good, stable mid laners, Faker and Scout, kind of most recently. And realistically, nobody ever is going to take Faker's starting position, even if they are better than Faker, purely for T1 brand reasons, right? So you have to consider that. But either we're led to believe that he is suddenly, upon returning to Korea, taken a giant leap forward in his career, or was improving dramatically while under Scout on EDG to the point where he is now a viable top-tier mid laner, when he never has been previously. Or I think the more likely conclusion is that he may be overperforming currently, but will regress to the mean eventually. Or we have to believe that Korean mid competition is not amazing right now. And if he was a sub in an LPL team and is now coming back to dominate LCK, maybe that's not a good sign for mid competition at international events from Korean players.
I can see that kind of counter argument for sure. I think everything you said makes sense, but I look at his performance and there hasn't really been a moment for Gory, whereas everyone else on Nongshim, well, I'd say everyone but Duckdom, has definitely had their highs and lows this season. Whereas I think Gory has been extremely consistent, like the most consistent player on the team by a pretty large margin, even better than Duckdom in my opinion. So much so that I don't think the argument about him being like him overperforming, and then maybe he'll just regress back to like how he was and why he wasn't played over a scout, for example, is one that will come true just based on what I've seen and based on what I've commentated. But the argument that there's a lot of, I guess, variance and volatility right now in mid matchups and where the mid lane is in Korea right now is absolutely true. We went from a meta where everybody was playing control mages to very quickly everybody was playing, set mid and everyone was playing melee. Akali was coming back to now like everyone's playing Ryze and Lucian because Prio is king, and then also Ryze can deal with Azir over here. It's like, I gotta get Prio's so important, but also like I gotta deal with all these melee champions. Those Ryze roots seem pretty good right now. So the meta has shifted like so many times it's hard to stay at a top level, but I think Gory has kind of rode the waves throughout all of those very, very well. And that makes me confident as well that no matter what meta we will get, because what World's meta is going to look like is going to be totally different from what we're looking at right now or way in the future. I think that he will perform in the future based on what I've seen from him so far. And I know that sounds like a crazy leap to make just based on such a short amount of time. But, I mean, he has... I've never seen in any of my time casting in esports a player who was a weak link on a team get replaced by somebody who became their strong link. Like, it's like turning on a light switch. It was unbelievable, the difference between him and Bae and their impact on the team.
I have to admit, I didn't watch a lot of Nongshim in spring because they were a 7-11 team that lost in the first round of playoffs. So I'm relying on you to kind of explain the big difference between the two rosters come spring, between spring and summer.
Oh, the spring, yeah. I mean, the spring roster was so reliant on pop-off performances from Rich and Peanut, and Duck Dom was like, I got all the gold, but you guys either crush the team fight and we win it, or you died and I can't do anything. Duck Dom was kind of like, I'm fed, I'm on Aphelios, like this is my thing. Can you guys frontline for me? And Rich is like, sorry, I died solo, like over there. Or like, sorry, I was trying to clear that ward and I got picked off, and now we just can't fight for Baron. And Duck Dom's like, I'm hitting my 3-item power spike here. Like, what's going on? That was a lot of what happened for spring, but now it's just a fully upgraded team, I think, across the board.
I will
because
say
they have that
like,
mid laner.
Like the Rich angle is interesting because actually you made like a decent case for him. I actually thought the Heroes of the Storm angle was a good angle because the idea was if people didn't get like the combined angle of how he plays in lane and then team fight, because he comes from a game that isn't about one person being fed like League and Dota, he just views the champion as like, what is the kit of this champion and what can I do in this moment? And obviously in his old game, well, you aren't all super far behind. Like, unless the other team's completely ahead of you, you've got a chance if you do the right thing. Which I actually think, by the way, fits top lane way more, especially as you say, if you're playing something like Gnar, which is essentially like, well, it's a bruiser, so it's like it's a half tank, half like you do some damage, but really you do it for the utility. Like you can obviously still do something even if you haven't done well in lane. Whereas if you remember, when this guy was the sub on Gen G, this guy was trying to be a fucking mid laner. Listen, homie, you're not going to come from Heroes of the Storm, Babby's first MOBA, and go to Korea and just go big balls in the main role in the whole game when you aren't even familiar with carrying. Nah, that ain't going to happen. So top lane at least makes sense. That actually makes sense. So I will say, if he's doing all right, Peanut is still a good player. It's just he's just one of those players who's just some weird issue in pressure scenarios. And then if the Gory guy's decent enough, you've got like the makings of a team there. The problem I have with this is like, I've seen too many splits in Korea, Wolf, where if you actually have the really quality roster, Korea really is the region, not just because of the gauntlet, where you just have to make playoffs. Like T1's done it a fucking million times. You don't have to actually be like number one in the standings to have a chance to like make the final. If you've got the really good players, as long as you make even the last spot in playoffs, you're like, we'll get together game on game on game. So unfortunately, I feel like this is going to be the team where they're also potentially... Wait a minute, actually, the format's changed. Isn't playoffs now like it's not a gauntlet anymore, right?
It's not a gauntlet. It is a bracket format. 6 teams go to bracket.
Then. I will say that's better then, because I would say this is a team where in the past, by the way, if this team really did finish top 2 in the league, they would be primed to just get rocked by whoever makes it through that gauntlet. Because it'd be your first match. You're just sitting there. You haven't even played a playoff game yet. And then all of a sudden, whoever makes it there, T1, someone legit, they're just going to rock you. You've got no experience. So at least they've got that element. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's the same thing that we used to see in like some of the other playoff systems where the top 6 teams are there and the bottom 4 play in quarters and then the top 2 get buys into the semifinals.
Right, yeah, that's right, yes.
But it's not double elimination, so if Nongshim does stay in second place, they could still just get rocked in the semifinals, and then that would be it.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. They could actually get the first seed. It's not looking, impossible by any means right now that they actually are the ones who get the first seed, get to pick their opponent in the semifinals. It's a crazy world we're living in where that is actually the case, considering how poorly they performed in spring, and how they just barely got into playoffs and then got slapped. Actually, that series was a lot closer than we expected it to be. But anyways, it is a pretty big change, and for all of us, it's still kind of like hard to get used to because you do always have at the back of your mind, and there's definitely some truth to this of like, is the LCK just kind of crazy right now in a bad way? Like, is the LCK just weaker right now in general, and that's why they're able to just kind of rocket to the top by path of like least resistance because they're the one team that's doing very well right now? That's certainly a possibility. I think there are some aspects of that are absolutely true. Dom1 having a crashed bottom lane, T1 having coaching issues right now, Genji, we'll see what happens with that one. That's the last match of the season.
Killed my soul
at all, ever.
The one that killed my soul completely and made me wonder what LCK is supposed to be right now was when Dam1 was doing that stupid ass shit where they were almost like intentionally feeding by changing all the lanes. So like Canyon was the mid laner, and they still beat fucking Chovy's team. That was like, what even is this league anymore? That dude, if Riot can ban you for going 0-10 in a game, their whole team should have been competitive ruling for fucking 2 weeks for that. That was a disgrace. What the fuck? But they won the game, I guess, so I can't complain. Like, what the fuck?
What I don't understand about Dom1 is why they can't get any other, like, backup AD carries or supports.
They did get a backup AD carry now, Rahel.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you're Dom1, this is what makes no sense about Korean GMing. Why aren't you out there, like, trying to buy Gumayushi or Teddy or anybody, somebody with a pulse or, like, a different support, especially because Beryl was the one who actually kind of threw that series that they play against T1. But how many times can Beryl get caught out? They need a better upgrade at those positions. And if you're the reigning world champion, if you just made the finals at MSI, if you're the reigning LCK champions, why can't you get 2 better players onto this roster so at least you could make a competitive world run?
I could kind of answer that question in that in the West, a lot of these orgs like are only esports. Like they are an esports org. They have a lot of money, they have investment capital, but the people running the team are like the esport, like TSM. I'm TSM. I made this team. I built this brand. I have all this investment. I have all these sponsors. Whereas a team like Dam1 Kia or KT Rolster, for example, is like KT is the org. It's a telecom company. The team is just like this one tiny part of them. They've got a baseball team. They've got a soccer team. They have a basketball team, etc. And this is just like one tiny part of them. So if their LoL team is not doing that well in a franchise spot where they're not even, there's no chance they're going to get relegated, and they're still guaranteed to be seen by, 18 best of threes a season because that's the format. Like for a lot of these teams, I think the argument is like, well, I'm not just going to suddenly go, well, let me just pull out a couple $100,000, buy this player, or make a trade right now because they're like, let's see how it goes, see viewership, let's make a budget for next year. Like they are just a part of the family, right? For these teams. So a lot of teams, it's not like, where TSM might just be like, it's fucked. We got to spend $1 million. It doesn't matter. We have to fix this. Our reputation is going down. Like this is all we are. This is it. Whereas KT is like, we're not doing so great right now. We were a legendary LCK team, but maybe we'll bounce back in a few years. We had the best KBO team this season. So, whatever. Like, I think that argument, people don't always realize that the way esports works in the West, where you just go, buy it, sell, buy. It doesn't really happen like that. Here, it's a lot slower.
And the reason why T1 is willing to do it is because they're controlled by an American entity that actually cares about esports right now. By the way, guys. Yes. So T1 now is not the same T1 that existed a few years ago because they're owned by Comcast now.
Yeah.
So in any case, like I agree with that take, Wolf, but it is, for Dam1 in particular, it is a little bit more confusing because they're not one of these organizations. Like Kia has all of these other things, but the Kia sponsorship is relatively new. And it seems like such an obvious place to start with this team that why wouldn't you? I mean, look, all I have to say is this. The only possible conclusion that we can draw is that they don't want to spend money right now because my theory would be that they know that Showmaker and Canyon are probably not going to be on that team next year. So what's the point in spending a bunch of money on player transfers right now when odds are those players are going to get sold or leave the team?
Yeah, I mean, Khan is likely to retire because he has to go to the military next year. So, I personally think just right now, from the outside looking in again with no inside information, that I think Dom1Q will completely split up after this Worlds, like no matter what.
That's the only conclusion.
Like Rocks Tigers-esque, like these players go like all into 5 directions. Like I don't know. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 players stay, but just generally speaking, this whole team is going to split up after this season.
Yes,
in my opinion.
What do you know? Canyon and Showmaker's contracts are over in November. I just looked it up. So there you go. Mystery solved, guys. I bet those guys are not coming back.
Yeah, I don't think so. So it is kind of awkward because now there's also a minimum salary requirement. I think it's 60K, I believe, for 60 million won for an LCK team. So if you bring somebody up, you have to pay them extra no matter what. I don't know the exact rules of that. But it's kind of awkward if you bring someone at the second half of the season and then you have to like pay them for a year, a certain amount, or if you like go, well, didn't work out, see ya, you might still have to pay them like the rest of that 60K. I don't know exactly how the rules work for that, but that's something else to consider. You might just be like, well, if you're not looking for somebody long term, it doesn't really work. It's much easier to take your already bot laner for your academy team and Rahel and just bring him up and be like, well, it may be UC play if Ghost, just starts shitting the bed again, or if there's a really big problem. I'm personally of the opinion that I think we should see what happens when Ghost is given a different support rather than to see what happens when Beryl is given a different AD
Beryl is the biggest trash can on the team for sure.
But that's just me, it seems like a lot of people have different opinions. We had Showmaker in the bottom lane and a bunch of craziness. My camera's going out of focus. We had a bunch of craziness all year, or all beginning of the season, rather, I should say, around this, trying to figure out how to fix the bottom lane for Beryl, when I think the reality should have been how to fix the bottom lane for Ghost, and maybe Beryl should have been taking the brunt of that. But it's hard. How many support players can you actually pull into this team that are going to be world class? It's not an easy problem to fix. I think a lot of people watching Dom1Q just go, Beryl's a problem. Why can't they just fix that? Well, it's actually quite complex. Like, how do you take another support that is going to be up to Beryl's level at his peak and just slot him in and build that synergy? It's really hard.
I also, the thing is, when you say that point, because I never considered that actually, I wonder how that does work with the minimum salary. Because the problem is, if it is just that you only get paid for that section, like, it would sort of make sense, because it would be unfair if you're the starter and you just get like your total amount for the split, and then you get subbed out like 2 weeks in and the other guy gets like a lower amount, but he's doing your job. At the same time, though, it would be gangster as fuck, because if they did it pro rata, Wolf, that means technically, with how many games you play in LCK, you could get subbed in, be the worst player ever in LCK, and then they just pay you like 1.5k for that game. Like, ooh, that was a fucking.
This is something I'm going to explore actually this week, because I do want to know how this works, and I don't know if anyone will give me the answers, but I would like to know, because we do have a system in the LCK which is quite unique to the LCK, where every 2 weeks you can change your players between academy and LCK basically, and it's very new. It used to be you can only do it right before round 2 and then right before playoffs. Now you can do it every 2 weeks. And also during those 2 weeks, the Challengers team has the opportunity to fire a player. For example, like Dom1Q fired a player, Cal, as their like backup support player for Challengers. He just got fired, like that was announced today. And so I don't know how this works. If you can constantly move players between both, how does that work for their salaries? How does the minimum salary for the Challengers team then get pushed into regular? I don't know. So I'm going to be trying to dig deeper and find some answers on that, because I think that affects a lot, right? It affects how much movement we are seeing in the LCK right now, and it affects the ability to hire new players. And maybe it actually discourages trading, because we're not seeing any trades right now in the LCK whatsoever at all. So I think like we're going to look under the microscope a little bit this to like maybe get some clues as to why we are seeing so few changes, because buying a player goes back to the issue I said, like most of these teams do budget by the year, and they don't really go, we got to throw the bag, we got to save the season, because it's so small to them. But in terms of like small decisions, like how do you replace Ghost, how do you replace Beryl, and where do you move these players, it becomes a little bit more complicated.
To be fair, they didn't buy Sword Art for 6 million though, so they're not that bad yet, guys. They're not. Listen, there's not panic stations quite yet. Okay.
I look forward to TSM Barrel at 7 million next year. That would be
my dream, mate.
Fabulous. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Wolf. We've kept Jiizuke waiting. So have a good night. We'll be back with Jiizuke to talk LCS and EG in just a few minutes. All right, we're back to talk here with Jiizuke from Evil Geniuses. He's was on, I should say, a massive win streak. A slight blip due to some unfortunate Syndra play in the bottom lane. But, you got over it. You kept on rolling immediately, picking up 2 more wins, including just an insanely dominant win against Dignitas. I felt really bad. I could tell you did not because I was watching your player cam the entire time and you're just fucking
he's
laughing
toxic as
your
fuck,
ass
mate.
off.
Yeah, he loves it. Of course. Yeah. Of course. He has no sympathy.
No, man, the game was hilarious to play. Like, from the very start, so the level 1 fucked me over a bit because they killed the 2 of us, right? And then they put a ward on the river, and I really want to go top against Volibear. I really want to go top against Volibear, and we want Renek to go mid against Aurelia. But then I'm telling Impact, but there is a ward. You have to go all around and go mid. And it's like, but I'm not in time for the wave, so I just went. And then Aurelia goes top, Volibear goes mid. I'm like, okay, this guy will fucking kill me at level 2. So I was like playing over the wave, level 1, and try to not give him all in angle. Then I get to push the second and third wave together. I'm like, okay, never coming again. Bye. See you. I went mid. I'm telling Impact to damage trade with Volibear, and then he solo kills him, and I'm like, okay, good. then I'm like, Impact, don't kill the minion, let him TP on the wave. And he actually TPs on the wave. We force his flash, he's 200 HP. And after that, I TP mid, and Impact goes top. And Volibear is basing again to a lane where he cannot farm anymore. Like, it's like level 6 against level 4. Volibear is not farming from the moment onward ever again.
and then of course you just...
What do you actually think about that as a change? Because if people don't know, when you actually came into like EU LCS, was back when like you didn't constantly like what do you call it, flex between mid and top. It's like mid lane had its own champions, top lane had its own champions. You stay mid lane, and obviously back then, even in your era, like if the mid lane is good in EU, he's just always side laning 24/7. So like, what do you actually think about the evolution the last sort of 3 years of League, where like now top and mid, it's routine that there's a lot of shared champion pool. Sometimes obviously you literally lane swap if you want the better matchup, like you're saying. What do you think about this evolution? Do you like it?
I love it. Like, it's something I explored even in Vitality in both years, and then now actually in 2020 it began to like share set Renekton on all the champions, and then I was like actively trying to swap. I think last year I could not have done it a lot because Kumo was a rookie, but this year with Impact is very fun to explore, and just enemy will not know like what matchup do we want really. So yeah, it's fun like getting advantages like this because for example, this game Volibear should win Renek on top, but like on mid, if it is swap, the matchup is worse for Volibear.
Well, and here's the thing is that you can tell that they were waiting to do that because they're level 1. They were standing inside. Yeah. They were playing on red side, and they were standing inside the brush by their red buff, just waiting to see where you guys went before they assigned lanes. So they definitely knew what you guys were up to, but at the same time, it becomes very difficult to stop, especially once Impact starts getting all of those kills. And what was remarkable about that game was he had the biggest gold difference at 10 in the entire history of the LCS. He was something like 2,500 gold ahead at 10 minutes. So at that point, you guys, could do whatever you wanted. And frankly, I was finally happy to see Fake God living up to his name, being an entirely false deity compared to the real League of Legends god that is Impact, the legendary world champion player.
No,
how many times are you going to write that guy off?
Impact was having fun for sure. Solo kill mid, then we almost kill mid again. TP stop, Irelia goes on the wave. I was like, I think if you watch the pro, we were spamming in the area. What the fuck is this guy doing? And then he solo kills him. Then Volibear comes top. Impact is playing between 2 lanes because we are.
And then you're walking top.
All the time. And then Jiizuke, you cannot farm against it, right? Okay, I go mid, and then I'm top, and it was so fun because Fake God was pressured to a certain level that I didn't have anyone behind me, but he still did not want to go tower because he thought that we are diving him like a stray, you know. It was a very fun game to play. And after, yeah, I was every ult or TP I used, I'm not getting kills, so it was that I was just dying. I was like, please give me kill, please give me this. I'm coming, I'm TPing, I'm doing this. But then, and then after a bit, I think I did the PvE rotation, golems, gromp, wolf, wave for like 10 times, and then had the 4k gold in base. And from one item, I went to 2 core.
So I want to talk. We'll get back to discussing about kind of the week's matchups, but I want to go back a little bit because this is the first time we've had you on the show, and last year was a bit weird, I think, for EG and for you in particular, especially because
you got benched.
You got benched, even though your own individual performance was quite good.
On it, I know.
See, we wait, Jiizuke, because now here's the thing. You wouldn't have been able to talk about that at the time, but now that we've waited, and now that you have, Peter Dunn comes, you've got new management, you can go ahead and throw people under the bus now, right? It's
You're
totally
an evil
okay.
organization. You're supposed to live evil, so live up to it. There you go. Come on.
Exactly.
What do you really think about that scenario? Because that's Monty's implying there. Listen, you had a few games when you had to play like the Azir Orianna, that wasn't that great, but you were clearly the better mid laner. But realistically, they had to take you out in order to change the top laner, right? So wasn't that kind of a bullshit scenario for you? I'm pretty sure you didn't go to America to just be on the bench, right?
Where to start? I mean, honestly, okay, to start everything, I mean, I was excited to come to AG because of,
Money? They got a lot of money?
No, honestly, I never took, I didn't want to come NA until I had the AG offer. I had 3-4 offers from NA.
Fair
and
enough.
I didn't like the teams, but then I saw that there is a team with Bang and Svenska and Ziza at the time. Well, I lost at Worlds against them, in 2018.
Right,
So I had respect for them, and so I had this two and then Bang, and I'm like, wait, I can actually win if I go NA, Like at the time, I had 4 NA offers, 0 EU, and regional. I could go regional league, so that was my.
You had 0 LEC offers.
That's insane.
How is that possible?
I mean, that year we just had we were pretty bad in Vitality. I mean,
in the spring you were pretty good. You were all right in part of the summer. It was only at the end of the season, really, it went to shit.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like for me, 2019 January, February, I was really sick. Then I came out of it, and the playoffs I played pretty good, I think. And I did the same in summer, but it was just not enough. We got kicked legit in the first round both times.
Let me ask you a question then, because one thing I actually know about your career that I actually heard from Veteran back when I used to do a show with him is he always uses you as an example of why he liked it when LEC had actual promotion and relegation instead of just like franchising, because he always uses you as the example of a player that he doesn't think would have ever gotten into LEC, because he said you basically were LEC quality like years before you even got in with Giants, but that at the time the reputation was like from solo queue that people thought you were toxic, and so the teams didn't want to pick you up, and like no one wanted to give you a spot, which obviously in the modern day that has to happen. Someone has to sign you to the team, whereas in Giants in that case you could just beat them and get into the league, obviously. So do you think any of this still exists? Like, does that still exist in the pro scene? Because I can't believe it's from an individual level of player. I've always thought you were a very good player. So do you think you just had a bad rep in Europe or something?
I mean, I did that bad rep in Europe, and I think like everything in this world, you need connections. And you have to be likable, And yes, I was really toxic. I was a really bad place in my life, and I just was throwing everything on writing in the game, So people in solo queue didn't like me, but
the text equivalent of doing that all the time, right? Like that, like whatever that is. One of those, yeah, I know. I've been there.
And anyway, when I had the first experience like talking to pro players in real life, they're like, "Wait, you are this person?" I wouldn't imagine, like I think Alfari was the first one. I met him like LCS, and then he saw this guy laughing and talking. I'm like, I would have never imagined you were like this, And anyway, to go back, like in 2019, it was a bad year, and then I like this team. I like this team of AG of those 3 people. I didn't know who was up back then. Then there was Kumu, right? I mean, it was still fine. But anyway, like we started like 2 weeks, 3 weeks Korean bootcamp in in Korea. And then basically like it felt really good, you know, like we were screaming Korean teams. We even beat some top teams, and it was feeling really good. But after 1 week of like freedom of like playing like we want to, it was already boom. The plan of this team is create an LCK team in NA. And I've been through that already, and I got benched by the same style. Like when I was in Team Forge, basically I had the sandbox coach before Yamato is called Laden, and the APK Prince coach like last year. I had them in the Team Forge in 2016, and I got benched by them by the same thought process, because I was just I was not playing disciplined enough, you know, and just doing what they want. Like I was always this player that want to do like peaks and snowball out of control a game, you know. And I got benched by the same principle. So like when on the second week, when they actually wanted like, okay, we're gonna play full macro, this and that, I was like, shit, not again. And then I tried to like ignore it for a little bit, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But then I'm watching, like I'm playing away, and then my team is playing away. So Irene told me that I know he knows how I want to play, and we will go there after. But for now, just focus on macro and play as a team. And that's what I did for like a month, and that's the period where I was playing A0 Ren and everything, which I don't dislike, but I just think when we went to team fights, we could not win. Like it's very detailed to play team fights, and you have to understand who's making space and who's like suiciding to make space, you know. And it's like who has to do damage and who has to win. And it's like we were not on the same page even on that, because we didn't have team synergy. And then after a month, I was like, okay, I'm done with this shit. And then I went back to my champions. And that's where
also never really was your style. Like, your style obviously is like fuck team fights. Like I just go in the side lane, I'm fed. For you, macro is what level are they going to gank at within the first 6 levels, and then macro in the late game is you stay mid while I'm in the side lane, and then when I say to come to me, don't fight. Whereas like in a team fight, you actually have to be coordinated. Yeah, your style is like basically you just have macro. Just personal macro.
He is the macro. It's true.
Dude, he's basically like the origin of the game. He's like playing Warcraft 3, and he's like the fucking super champion, and then they're all just the minion peons, aren't they? Like the rest of the team.
Yeah, and speaking as a Warcraft 3 caster, it's a viable strategy. So you take your hero unit and you go harass them, right? And then you just feed your army into them. But see, here's the thing, and we talked about this on last week's episode, is the thing about EG, the problem that they had was that Jiizuke was like the hero unit, and then Bang was just too cowardly to like attack the base as part of the peon army. Whereas like Danny is now the young guy where you're just like, Danny, I'm sorry, we're gonna need you to just like go attack their base right now. He's like, okay, I'll go do that. And that way when Jiizuke dies by himself, it doesn't matter, right?
Okay. But
it's true, and I think that's. And by the way, Thorin, what you're saying is accurate. Like it's reflected in the stats. Like Jiizuke gets more % of farm after 15 minutes than any other mid laner in the league. You just dump in farm straight into him every time, and it's the strategy that works. But what the problem with former iterations of EG is that if you have a bitch AD carry, you can't like when Jiizuke dies, it doesn't. Then the pressure shifts. If you have the AD carry who's off actually applying pressure in a lane and who's picking first, allowing Jiizuke to get counter picks a lot of the time, then all of a sudden, if Jiizuke dies or if the AD carry dies, someone is still applying pressure. The problem with EG previously was that there was only one person applying pressure, and it was Jiizuke. You needed someone else to be doing that, even if it was a suicide mission.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you saw what are the games, all we were doing was suicide split pushing, you know, like all the time. And then they have to answer one side, but they cannot answer 2 sides. And if they answer 2, then their mid is over, or like we are going Nashor or something, you know. So it was like really easy to play, and also it was not advanced as it is now. So it was no one played that style. But for sure in NA, like early game is not as considered as a mid late game, and mid game farming like split push and everything is also not advanced. Like that's why I can farm more than anyone else just because I know how to farm. And like if my jungle is topset and he has to pressure topset, I'm farming the camps, and then I go push bot, and then if I see enemies like full topset as well, like I get enemy camps, I get golems, raids. So like at one point you do 2 camps enemy side, 2 camps my side, 3 waves, and then oh shit, you are 50 CS ahead, you know. But like you just have to see numbers in the map and just abuse it, you know. And I think
Do you think that one of the I mean, listen, the meta did switch a little bit this year to make it more viable to side lane anyway, but do you think that actually Peter Don coming in, was that actually helping you be able to play your style more? Because obviously he understands the EU meta, etc. Whereas like I'm sure NA coaches, like it's been team fight meta there forever in LCS basically, you know.
I mean, it helped for sure, but if I have to play control mages, for me, I don't really mind. Like I can still play them. Like last split I played them, and I had many good games. Like I remember on Oriana Azir.
Yeah, but you had Deftly, so.
You
Anyway,
don't
continue.
look at AD carries in your career, really, do you? You know, I mean, to be fair, maybe the Danny guy's going to turn it around, but it's been a bit rough thus far. That's all I'm going to say. The list, that's brutal. All I'm going to say is that must be your
you
karma
go
for
straight
being
to the
flaming
point.
everyone. Yeah, don't worry about it, mate. I don't, you know, don't chop the onions.
I mean, honestly, the only thing I'll say about Deathly is that he didn't know how to make spaces, so team fights were really hard to play.
Yes.
especially in
No,
control
no, no.
mid meta.
He knew how to
Like,
flash into them and die immediately.
like
Yeah.
if I were playing Syndra or Oriana or Azir, I'm always the one that have to make space, and it was so hard because like the enemy is looking at me to kill me. But like the AD carries were like Kai'Sa, Shaya, and these champions that can survive so much, right? And
Oh.
it was so hard to play, and that's why I always wanted to play all the other champs. But I think if control mage were to come now, I'm really like confident, you know. Like I think we have 5 players that can just make space and team fight well. So I mean, I think Danny goes in. Okay, to make the difference between Deftly and Dan, Deftly will never go if he thinks he's gonna int. Like there are actually some players that care about. Okay, wait. I care about how I look, right? Like on in game, how I will
Yeah.
look, but it's like it's not like I'm gonna think in game. Oh my god, if I do this, they will judge me forever. Oh shit, I'm
Right.
gonna be enter. I don't give a shit, you know.
Okay.
If it's gonna be win me the game, I will do it. I don't care, you know. Like I can suicide and let my team get an ace because I suicided. I don't care, you know. But like I think definitely was one of the players that he actually cared and were making those decisions in game, you know. Like I
Right.
never saw him going in like to make space 1v5, 1v3, or like I saw him always going at the end, like every low HP is just cleaning up, you know. I never saw him like actually making the call himself, and that's
Right.
just a mistake. I'm done. I think he did it many times already this season, and he's playing good. Yeah.
Well, it just goes to show too, like you know, we talk about how kind of the GMing isn't good a lot of the time in League of Legends, and I really felt that way last year when watching Evil Geniuses, because it seemed like a very weird decision to take you, and even though you were playing unorthodox like Echo and you know doing these split pushes last year, champions that you're known for, and then replace you with Golden Glue to try and play like frankly a bad Korean style when you actually had an effective style that you were running. Just didn't seem like a way to like do well towards the end of the year and you know kind of excel into Worlds, and lo and behold wasn't too great. And but what's shocking about this situation is that you guys come back this year, you know, you bring Deftly in, Bank's no longer on the roster. You have impact on the roster, and you start and with one change, and that one change is a player that wasn't even really in academy. He was like kind of an amateur player coming in, but his style at AD carry fits the team so much better. And then all of a sudden, you guys are on these huge winning streaks because you can actually see your potential being unlocked, Impact's potential being unlocked to a great degree. And that's what's fascinating to me is like, it really, as I think as fans should take this, is like, maybe players aren't washed up or bad. A lot of the time, in my opinion, in League of Legends, it's poor GMing and activation of the players that's bad.
No, that is true. Definitely, I think to finish the point of last year, like to me, I never when Uni came, I was actually happy. Okay, I was actually happy because I thought, oh my god, we can do like weird shit here. We can either play Banguni or I can play with Uni, you know. And me and Uni excited me because that's all I did in Vitality. All the time, mid to top, we dove, redove. Whatever I'm doing with Impact round, you know. It's like it's so easy to play the game that way, and I thought it would have been a good strategy in NA, especially last year, because it was even worse than now. Like people don't know how to react to it, you know.
Yes.
And like and I think what's sad about all that period is that I got benched and it was like so sudden and I don't know why. And but after that I never got a single scrim. I didn't even try with Oni. They didn't give me the chance. That was the most sad part.
That's one thing I don't understand, by the way. Like, it'll never make sense to me in general about the way people think about the game. Like, I'm personally someone, by the way, who totally disagrees with the idea that there's a global meta in the game of champions, and you must just pick the best champions no matter what region you're in. I think each region should have its own meta, its own logic. It should also be based on player strength, team composition, as in, like, what type of players you have. Because to me, like Monty was saying in that example, it makes no sense to me to have Golden Glue be, like, the 158th best Orianna in the world, as opposed to you be like, I don't know, the 30th best Echo or something in a region, by the way, where people are never going to have played Echo matchups. They're never going to know what it does. They're never going to have had an Echo go and roam top and dive the top laner. That's never happened. Like, never going to have seen any of that shit, are they?
And here's my question about last year. Why was like Bang the immovable rock of the roster? Like why was he the like?
Because he won Worlds, bro. He won Worlds, didn't he?
You didn't have a chance to scrim with Huni, but they never were like, oh, well, it's like, why is Bang the one who can't be replaced, or like the one who can't be subbed out?
I mean, Bang is Bang, man. Like, I mean,
we
he's a
know.
world champion.
Trust me, I spent a lot of time watching Bang in my life.
I mean, he's a world champion, and he deserves all the respect that he has, right? And he deserves. But I think, I mean, just because I experienced it already in 2006, as I said before, I knew it was gonna be a fail. Like I really tried. Like I was 1 month, 2 months, like sitting there. I'm like, after Ariane told me to just adapt to the team playstyle, I'm like, okay, sure, let's go for it. But then we're going close to playoff, and I'm like, there is no way we can even go quarterfinals like this. there is no way, you know. And then I just swapped around, and then I mean, we were winning, and then just FlyQuest. I think we played FlyQuest first, and it was an absolute disaster. Top lane was like we were getting solo killed and everything. And then, yeah, after as well, the next BFI, we were not a team. Like, so I think I still wanted to play my way, and the others wanted to play their way. But even if I joined the team fight and everything, we would still lose. So like, we just didn't understand how to win properly, you know. And yeah, but like, it's gonna be one of the biggest regrets in my life that I didn't get to play last year and play with Uni and at least try, you know, because like I was there, I was like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, like trying to coach Golden Glue and just the team, you know, and after a bit,
I can't even imagine that. Like how could you even conceive that Jiizuke is coaching Golden Glue to play the game? Like,
I mean, anyway, after a bit, I was like, they're never gonna put me in, so I was like really depressed, you know. I was like, why is this happening even? And I mean, to go your point of Golden Glue is like, I mean, everyone knew, everyone in the team knew that he's just basically the only reason why he's in the team is because he's American, you know. That's actually only the reason, you know. Like,
got the passport,
not feelings to Golden Glue. I think he's a nice person, but he's like,
he's a great guy.
He was only there because we had the 2 import slot and the only banger to play, so he was there, you know.
Here's what I think we do now, Jiizuke. Bearing in mind, there was a lot of like depressing stories in that, you know, retelling. There's a lot of flame on the org, by the way. Listen, you signed Jiizuke. You should fucking know what you're signing if you've signed a player like that. You know, don't start complaining now about PR.
Look, I just appreciate that Jiizuke is actually holding up the evil genius's legacy. Like, actually,
he's like an evil fucking villain. Yeah, exactly. He's like from Dr. Doom or something.
I'm not Jiizuke. It's not about being toxic. It's about being lovable and evil in the vein of Idra and Huck, man. You carry the torch. I really appreciate it.
Like despicable me for him. Maybe it's more like despicable fucking Jiizuke. No, here's the thing. My question is this, right? Let's just pretend Spring Split didn't happen. Because first of all, For you, it almost didn't. And then secondly, you lost to TSM, so who gives a fuck? Let's just go straight to summer. Let's start talking about summer, the good times. Let the good times roll.
Okay, let's go.
Let's do it.
Summer. I think.
No, let's start with putting Danny on the roster and how that happened, because like you guys probably went through some scrim periods. How much say did you guys have in that? How much was like Peter Dunn and the new coaching staff making decisions about how to activate the roster? Because it's turned out to be an extremely good move for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, after the spring was over, we just had meetings, and yeah, I mean, I think everyone definitely was out. Everyone just knew, and they gave us options about the carries, and Peter said there is this guy in amateur that is fucking good, and yeah, that's how we got to play, basically. Like they just asked every player, and then they made the choice between the coaching staff, and we got to scrim with him since May 10. And honestly, at start, it was like a bit of a disaster. But like going already 1 month in, having the practice and everything, it was like you could see the improvement every week. And I thought even the first week we would have gone maybe 2-1 or something. But we choked so hard. We just got 0-3 in our first week. And I was like, oh shit. Here we go again. The coinflip Jiizuke is back.
Yeah, shout out to Peter Dunn, because this guy has a fucking eye for talent. Look, he's even moving regions to do it. Like, he took someone from Proving Grounds, Monty. He's actually like in a team that's like winning loads of games. It's legit.
Well, also sticking with it too, because obviously it's going to be a disaster for somebody who's never really been coached at a professional level. And then not only that, but here's the crazy thing to me, Jiizuke, is that you guys have such a unique style, and you as a player have a unique style. And this guy kind of has to be your bitch in a lot of ways. You know, he's not going to get the counter picks. He has to apply pressure on the map. He's not just going to, he can't be brain dead and just like walk to dragon every time, because you guys make very complicated decisions about diving, going for side lanes instead of playing dragons. So this is a really hard position for a new player, one who's never been coached even at the amateur level, really to walk into. So for Peter Dunn to like stick with that as well is impressive to me.
It's a good point, but as long as there is trust, it's doable. You know, like 2018 when I was first joined, I didn't I was only following what Cabochard and Yamato were saying. You know, like I really didn't allow myself to have an opinion until maybe July that we were close to being towards if we win. So like until that point, I was like just listening, and I'm like, if they say the macro is this one, then I'm gonna follow, you know. And for me, it's the same case now. Just we have really good voices in our team, and as long as we listen to each other and trust each other, there is not gonna be issues, you know. Like I think I really like this spot. Like I didn't talk at all, you know, in 2018. I just focused on my mechanics. I was having the time of my life, just laughing on stage and outplaying everyone mechanically. So I don't think he dislikes it. I think he is enjoying himself, and it's a good spot to be in, you know.
So you did say that you did go 0-3 in that first week. You know, you weren't even facing, I would say, particularly good teams, especially when you're losing to that iteration of FlyQuest, right? And then
I mean, I think everyone like our screen with it was 80% or something, but like for like the last 2 weeks before the Dead 0-3, so we were so surprised we were on stage, and everyone is so like we were so nervous because it was the first time on stage, and I mean, first game honestly I throwed, like I was so ahead. I got 5 platings on my own with Tristana against Karma top. I don't fucking know of the matchup. Just went to plan out, like I don't know why I'm at Tristana into a Karma. I'm getting free matchup 36 head and everything. And I could have carried. I just I wanted to style a bit, I guess. My bad. And then like it should have still been 2-1 or 3-0, right? And then I mean, going to next week, we were the same mentality really. I think we just it was just a bad day in the office, and next week we know that we are gonna have a positive score. And that's what we did every week, basically. Like, I don't think anyone is especially insane in any, you know.
Did you find it weird that all these top teams that used to be above your team just started benching like star players and messing the roster up? As an outsider, what were you thinking?
I mean, to me, it was unbelievable, honestly. Like, Alfari, Sven, I mean, just it's really nuts that you can think of benching a player of such importance. Like I think I mean I remember we play Alfari in spring, right? And I go top against him. I'm 20 ahead or something, but I still cannot play the game because they play so well around him. Like I remember Corjani and Santori just gang top 3 times, and then I'm like, okay, I guess my advantage is gone. But like once you give your resources to the guy, he's gonna carry, you know. And with Jenkins, is like more. It's not the same, and I think yeah, Alfari is just really good. Like I remember I played against him in a BO5 as well in 2018, and I was like scared of the guy. You know, like I was fed, but I was like, oh, maybe he can carry. You know, that's what I was thinking. And Sven the same. This guy, like, is one of the hardest AD carries to play against because he fakes pressure a lot, and you have to know when is real pressure or not, you know. And to me, I never bite, so I just fucking go aggro. But to other players, probably it works, you know. Like they're like, oh, what the fuck? This guy is playing aggro. What is he doing? So that's why it was hilarious. Our last game against Cloud9, Dan was legit. Danny was legit. Like he doesn't give a shit. There was Perks and Sven trying to eat him and stuff, and it's like, okay. It was Tristan with you, like you can imagine the animation, like this, and like they didn't have any pressure on side, and the only chance was mid, and then he didn't give to them, and then it was a easy win. Yeah.
Dude, I can't handle the way you explained that, Monty. The way he was like, you know, but like I was never going to just go off any. Like he's like that fucking Anakin meme everyone keeps spamming, where he's just like, I'm going to go to the side lane now and then carry, and then they're like the Padme's like, and then pull back when they come to kill you, right? Just like,
it's all right. Somebody should definitely be photoshopping that and send it to us, guys.
Yes, do that immediately. That's
this is too funny, dude. My favorite other thing about you, Jiizuke, is now like in Pro View you can see like players muting you at the start of the game because you just like dude, you're inside people's heads at this point in time. It's absolutely incredible. Like the shit you're talking to them in the game, the way you're playing. It's it's just a joy to watch. And
you
like
do
you say,
that in scrims. Do you like do you talk trash in scrims in the world, sir?
I do, but just for fun. It's not shit talking to me. It's like I mean. You guys know the paint thing Wander did in you, right? Like what is going on?
Yes. Yeah.
I was in the game. I was the enemy. I was the fucking enemy, okay? And they were writing in chat and everything, like, and they did it for like a year. GTU, the lineup, they did it for a year. I was like, wait, they can just talk like that? And then
that's the difference between LEC and LCS, mate. Like in LEC, you can say shit like that and you go, well, it's all part of the game. In LCS, like it's if you go and say fucking boo to a goose, it's like foreigner commits hate crime against a quack bird. Like use a 10, like fucking.
Imagine you're in that game. They fucking stomped us. Okay, they had the Pike Yumi bot.
Yeah.
Nico mid, Elise, Yorick. Tell me how many meta champions there are in the game, okay? Elise was on meta in the meta as well. It was 5 against actually a serious comp. And they fucking destroyed us. And then after the game, one is tweeting, what is...
There you go. Dude, that's why I love people don't know because sadly the team's not very good at the moment, so they can't really trash talk. G2's trash talk is legit. Like people have probably seen by now that screenshot where Gilius in the spring was talking shit at the beginning to Wonder, and he was saying something like, you won't win or whatever. And then Wonder just literally comes instantly back, Monty, with the line like, you won't even be in playoffs or something. And Gilius is like, whoa. It's like you're just going fun and he just goes straight to violence. Like, takes his head straight off. I know.
I mean, actually, I guess it's really not my fault. I've been molded. Like,
exactly.
Atra was a trash talker, Jatra was a trash talker, Gilius was a trash talker. Only me and Capo were actually fine. We were not social media guys. Like, we were not doing much. But, like, the other 3 were trash talking all the time. Twitter, after a game, before a game. And then, I got the G2 experience in 2019. So, I don't know. I just... when the preview came out... I mean, actually, even before the preview, like, in scrims, I'm very friendly to every team. Like, I think every team has friends with someone in our team. So, like, we just talk a lot and... is like fun stuff like haha or something, you know, just happens. And then my issue was actually it goes back to a 0-3 week, because at 0-3 week I was like really serious about playing, and the fact is that I'm not a serious person, so like I needed to like have some fun involved, and that's how I got back the fun. I guess I was just being the same as scrims. Like I was just enjoying being on stage, enjoying playing, and chatting as well, you know. And
Hey, you very much embody the joie de vivre, mate. The joy of life. Yeah.
I love it. And like, I really wish, one of the things that LCK production does that I enjoy is like during the replays, like they'll show the replays of the comms with the players. And like, it's now they've like leveled it up. So the reaction shot also has like, the Korean players like saying like, oh yeah, take that or whatever. Right. But I really wish we had that in LCS where we could actually hear you just like laughing your ass off after some of these kills. Cause I just like every time you kill someone, I just like look at your player cam in the corner and you just look like you're having the best fucking time. And I just wish I knew what you were saying.
if you get the Dignitas game, if you get the mic check of the game, it's like insane. There was one point I'm not breathing for 30 seconds. I'm just laughing. Like when they were doing the inhibitor bot, I was like just watching. I'm like, what? Like I cannot breathe. I'm doing minions like this, just laughing, pinging them. I'm like, that's so fun. But yeah, I've been this kind of person, but it's been like since. I mean, I guess I was just lucky with my teams. Like 2017, everyone was like really funny in Giants. 2018, same. So like the personality always matched with mine. Everyone wanted to be serious, but have some fun at the same time. And it's a skill, by the way, because if you have people that want to be full serious, you can just have fun and everything, And I think in this team, especially impacted Ingrid, know how to balance it out,
Well, I
And,
think is what's so interesting about Impact right now is it feels like you've really unlocked him. Like I think that Impact has gotten somewhat of an unfair reputation as being more of a passive or weak side top laner in the context of LCS, and that has been true if you look at regular season. But he actually, if you look at his playoff performances, he's a player that always steps up, always delivers in the playoffs, can play. But now I feel like now that he's teamed up with you this year, we've seen so much synergy, so much like potential for you guys to play aggressively together, and he seems to really want to do that for the first time regularly, and I would say a while.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't expect that. And then we went to Scream, and then the meta was that, and I'm like, yeah, I can dive top here. Yeah, I can dive top here. Then it happened maybe 20 times. I'm like, okay, I guess that's our playstyle. We dive into top, and we shift pressure and do this, all the time.
Obviously, Monty, he heard that when he first said like top dive. He was like, "Yeah, top dive. I know the fucking meme. Yeah, the top. Come on. What? Remember this guy played with Jensen for like 3 years, and Jensen's whole thing was like he was like Frog, and he was like, leave fucking 3CS. I don't think so, mate. Those are my 3CS. You can get your own kills, but then jungling, get my lane, like so. But you had no attention for like 7 years.
No, yeah, I mean, he was playing with Xmithy too. He was just sitting there on Sejuani, like slowly farming.
Look at this guy's career. He had fucking Bengi, Faker, Xmithy, fucking Jensen. This guy had some ridiculous humans. I bet he just felt like he was literally just playing on his own, wasn't he? It's like playing PvE. All these animals just coming in and attacking him.
No, for sure, Impact, I think, really matches my playstyle. I mean, it was from the first days that... Like I think he just understand pressure a lot and he understand how to spread pressure on the map. And I think you will see as well every time I roam top, I'm probably getting the wave many times because he knows I'm going up mid to do the roam. And like if I go top, if I TP top, maybe TP's mid. Like just we are very synergized in that topic. Like we just understand how to farm efficiently everything and how to pressure the map and where we should dive and when we should not dive. Like sometimes it's fucking 3-0 and you can solo dive the guy. We're not going to dive again. We are gonna make him go 1v2, 1v3 for a while and then we go to the other side. It's like it's really fun being playing with him, and I think sometimes we're even more crazy in Scream. But I think last week the game against Dintas it showed like how much our craziness can go high. Like it was a really fun game to play.
Yeah, I mean, the level of dominance. I think like I'm curious how you took that first game that you played last week because obviously the Golden Guardians game it ended up breaking your win streak overall, but you were also playing a style which Danny's barely played professionally at all, and now he's being expected to play Syndra. Didn't actually go too hot. You guys were still in that game for a surprisingly long time, though. What was your attitude coming into the game? Was this just experimental, seeing with this win streak what you could do with your play style? Because you bounced back extremely fast, and by the end of the week, we're talking about that Dignitas game where you completely slapped them. Like it might have been the most one-sided game in the entirety of the LCS this year.
I mean, I think since Indra is a champion that we practice a lot on bot lane in scrims, and I don't think we ever lost on it actually. So we went to stage and we know what to expect. We are gonna win bot. I have winning matchup mid. I think we have Renekton into something top, so I have like Lucian. I can either win my lane or win my lane and dive side. And then there was no dive inside. And then I solo killed the guy right on mid. I don't know what. I don't know what happened. I don't know what he was doing.
He was playing the Lee Sin and he decided to queue into you randomly. He kind of inted.
I guess it was he wanted to show me that he respects me. Like he did my same play, you know. He wanted to show his respect and he just did it. I respect it
by bending the knee. It's a way to show respect, I guess. Anyway, continue.
But yeah, the game I was ahead, and then I think we were losing bot. We got solo killed, and then there was their play, and we lost that as well. So we are sitting on the back for the rest of the game basically, and we just try to get as much farm as possible because they're just trading and trading and trading when they can get anything they want instead. But yeah, we take it. We try to delay. I mean, honestly, if anyone picked up the slack, we would have won the game. Me included. I think I could have played better 2 fights, and if I did, maybe we would have won the game. But to me, it's not like I take losses lightly, but it's not gonna affect me the next day at least. It's I went the next day with a smile on my face, and I'm like, okay, pick Rise Renekton, and we just played that, and yeah, we were moving around the map well, and we just snowballed the game. It was pretty easy. I don't think anyone in the team will. I think actually the team was pressured though by the win streak. I was not, but I think the mood was weird on that day for sure. I guess the 8-0 win streak was something to feel pressured about. Yeah, but then after that was gone, I'm like, okay, I guess let's just play to win again, you know.
So when it comes to your opponents in LCS, obviously at the very start we saw 100 Thieves coming off extremely strong, playing all these different styles. They've kind of stumbled a little bit. You guys have beaten, I believe, every team in the second round robin or close to the second round robin at one point in time because of your win streak, right? So are there any teams that you feel are even remotely competitive for you? Because the only loss you've really faced in recent times has been more, kind of a fringe meta pickup in the bot lane for a rookie player. But most of the wins you've had have been extremely comfortable. You guys are dominating early games. You're basically the number one early game team in the lead. You're playing aggressively. You're closing out those leads pretty efficiently. So is there anything that you even feel is remotely threatening to you guys right now?
I mean, it's the classic answer, I guess, is has to be Cloud9 and one of their teams, right? They have good players everywhere, so if they improve, they are gonna be an opponent. But I don't know. Right now, I don't see us losing if we play good. But for sure, in playoffs, it's gonna be a different story if teams improve, and we'll have to see how much we improve more than them, you know, and just see from there. But to me, at least when I see a game now, I'm not confident. It's not like I'm not confident, but it's only hard to play against Cloud9 and one of these because of the mid jungle duo, you know. I like how they play with support, who is really good. The Vulcan is really good, and yeah, Blabber is probably the best mid lane in LCS. I think when he's good, he's you cannot play the game in mid, and I think it's close to what Flagwest had last year with Santorin, Ignan, or PoE. That they were playing 3-man mid. Now TSM is kind of copying that. They're playing together all the time. If you see the map, there are 3 mid and there is 1v1 bot. Always, you know. And yeah, I think if you put last year I would have said actually I'm not scared of anyone because I don't think anyone was playing Lanifis last year. But this year there's Abedag and Perks that are pretty good mid laners, so when you do that with a good jungler, good support, it's always entertaining and hard to play, you know.
ESM aren't on the radar as an actual team you're worried about though?
No.
Fair enough. Listen, I'm with you, but I just asked the question like it was a real thing.
I think if we play good, we can win. We can win very easily. Yeah, I don't mind anyone.
That's the clip. Now there's only two ways it goes. That's either a clip in a highlight movie, it's the clip when you lose. So one of the
it's the same shit we've been banging on about. It's like the individual talent on TSM is probably not going to carry you through the playoffs, even though their cohesion is better than many of the other top teams.
You'd love this. Someone said, I can't remember what Reddit thread I was reading today. Someone was like, why are people who are like streamers and, you know, like, and fucking, what do you like whatever you say, like content creators, why are they always banging on TSM? And then they did this thing, Monty, where they sort of reflected for a second. They were like, is it just for clicks? Is it just for controversy? And it's like, dude, they've become that Principal Skinner meme. It's like, we are the shittest fan base of all time. Why are people hating us? Is it us? Are we out of touch? No. It's everyone else. It's everyone else except us. Like, you guys are fucking real. Like, it's causing 9 years of this shit. What out of hell with all the demons and that? Like, yeah, you deserve to be there.
Yeah, exactly. We've had to deal with this fan base for so long, and you know, it starts innocuously enough. Where you're just like, hey, this team isn't that good, and then when the shitters come out of the woodwork and start attacking you for completely, you know, reasonable opinions, such as, I don't know, all those times Reginald said that the goal of TSM to win Worlds when they were never at any point in time in their entire history anywhere close to winning Worlds. And everybody's like, they're going to win Worlds next year. Surely they're going to be a top 4 team. It's like, no, we just have to be honest about reality. Like
next year is going to be better, man. Come on.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, so Sword Art's going to lead them to the World Finals next year. I'm absolutely sure of that. But that's why.
It's all that needs to be said, Monty, just to give everyone a concrete example, because you're all going to think, hey, you're exaggerating there, Thorin. TSM fans surely can't be that. But they're going to do that thing, Monty, with the equivocate when they don't know what to talk about. Like, every fan base has a bad bit. Today, I actually had an incident, right, where Dom had like a ridiculous hate thread where people were just going in on him completely. Because he also, just like LS, there's a certain group of us that always get the Reddit hate. And I just decided, because there's this new tool, I don't know if you've seen, I think people only found it recently, Monty. There's a site that lets you actually put someone's Reddit username in, and it analyzes their whole account. And it does sort of like, you know, like the thing where, you know, like those graphics that show how many words you've said and what
word
times.
cloud.
This just does a counter. Well, I looked it up, right, because I thought, this guy's hating on Dom a lot. I put in this guy's username, or what's it, what the username is. All you need to know is this. The account has only existed, Monty, for 9 months. In those 9 months, the number one word is TSM, which he said 303 times. And yet, if you go, I'm going to say like the 30-second most said word ahead of all players except Swordart is Thorin, and he said it 62 times. I wasn't even looking for myself. I was expecting Dom to be on there. He said, a TSM fan has said Thorin 62 times on Reddit in 9 months. Like, these guys are ridiculous. Because we needed that tool like about 8 years ago, though, Monty. Like, I wish we'd had this. You could have had so much fun with it back in the day. Because you know, back in the day when they used to like take the flare off so they could like get away with it for a week. Like, I'm just a random fan, but I hate Monty and Thorin on Summoning Insight. Yeah, I wonder who you're a fan of. Yeah, I wish I could actually have analysed that shit back then. Because it's like having one of those things out of fucking Dragon Ball Z. Like, oh, he's absolutely toxic. TSM fan, yeah. Absolute trash.
Honestly, I just love when Thorin like explains something detailedly. I just love it.
All right,
I cannot stop laughing.
All right.
So yes, that's why, guys, and you'll notice that there's been a trend over the past few weeks, which is that many professional players and coaches not too scared of TSM. TSM fans, it's not some grand TSM hate conspiracy. It's just that you're probably not that good. I hate to tell you, you're probably not that good. and they never learn either. It's like everyone was saying, TSM, you can win with Bjergsen playing Zillion and NA last year. You're not going to win on the world stage with that. Showmaker is going to put him in a trash can. Guess what happened, guys? Guess what happened?
I do love, though, one thing I have always appreciated is the complete lack of self-awareness and irony with TSM fans, Monty, because here's what happens. When TSM, by the way, obviously certain years, they did have the best team in LCS. When they do have the best team and we're like, yeah, they're number one, the fans just go, finally, they're telling the truth. It's like, you bozo, you absolute bozo, like, give me a break.
You see the Speak Alpha retweets?
Oh, no.
Like the banter, yeah. Basically, Speaker did a good banter onto Alfari. I'm trying to think what it was he said. What was it he said? What was the joke, Jiizuke? You remember?
He said, so I guess Jenkins is playing next week. Really fucked up.
There you go. Yeah, because
Really
because Team Liquid lost like the 100 Thieves game and the TSM game. He was like, I guess Jenkins is playing next week. Which is, it's not bad banter.
And then Alfari
pretty funny, by the way.
Alpha actually deleted him, but he doesn't have TSM fan base banned him, so they just lost the argument because of likes.
Yeah. By the way, I will say that's one thing that actually is a little bit off message for TSM. I have to say, Spica actually has pretty good sense of humor. It seems like to me, doesn't seem to get bothered by stuff like like TSM players do. And by the way, he's also probably the best player they've signed in about 2 years or something. So I actually like Spica. I think it's pretty legit.
I think Spica has to be one of the only people in NA that does social well, no?
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah, he's great.
I was surprised. I was like, what the fuck is getting so much attention?
I just looked at it. It's pretty funny. I mean, the thing about Spica too is he's actually a pretty good player as well in terms of. He's certainly like the standout player on TSM right now. I don't think he's the top jungler in NA, but for a newer player, he certainly is showing promise, and his presence and his character are certainly very, very welcomed. Very welcome.
Want to see how segues are done? Well, one of the interesting things about Speaker is obviously not so long ago, LS was featuring him on his stream with his pro view, and he was very impressed with some of the moves he did. I will say, Monty, it's 10% because he uses the F keys a lot and moves around the lanes, which is like LS's like fucking side religion that he tries to get you in. Like that's like the esoteric inner circle. Once he's got you to play Annie, then you have to come into the like proper level of the Illuminati. But okay, that obviously segues here, Jiizuke, because one of the things that I think actually before the big win streak had fully gotten going, one of the things that started to turn people on Reddit around about you actually was when Doublelift and those guys were looking at your pro view and they were sort of like, wow, he's actually a good player. Like, yeah, Doublelift, you've played in fucking NA your whole career, but yeah, he is. But then obviously when they were all saying on stream, like, oh, she's quite good actually, it made people sort of stop just flaming you. Because before that, you yourself seemed like you were a little bit touchy on this. If people call you a coin flip player, why did that trigger you? What do you think coin flip player means when they say it? Do you think they were trying to diss you when they say it?
I mean, okay, my take is I like the only thing that I don't understand is that all these people were pro players in their time, right? And they hated the fuck out of these fucking opinions of people that judge
I'm sure they
the
did,
game
yeah, of course, yeah.
when they don't have inside information. And like for me to see like some games they're saying I'm not grouping, I'm farming too much, this and that, and they don't have the specific in the game, or like they're not even mid laners. It was like triggering me so fucking hard, honestly. But like coin flip player, I mean, to me, I just go for so many plays. I think my threshold of mistakes has to be higher, no? I just go for so many plays. Sometimes I have to go wrong, no? That's just how it is. It's like
I actually agree with you. I think it's really unfair to call you a coin flip player because by definition, a coin flip player goes for 50-50s. You go for any fucking red 20s, 2080s. You take them all. Yeah, we take them all here. We just go for it all. You know, let the chips fall where they may.
Well, and also, dude,
you're more like a roulette player in many ways. You know, that's your game.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, Jiizuke. Here's the strategy that you have to employ is that you can't just say I'm not a coin flip player because you have to lean into it. That's how the internet works. Right. So when people called me a Korean dick sucker, I said, no, I'm a Korean fellatio enthusiast. So what you have to say is I'm not a coin flip player. You say I'm a high pressure player. I create pressure zones on the map.
But real pressure, not fake pressure like Sven. Exactly.
I mean, but anyway, like exactly my point. Like, I mean, we went on an 8-win streak, by the way. Like, it's not like, how can you call coin flip that even? You know, like to me, I'm just. I think I said this somewhere else, but if I do the correct thing 80-90% of the time, why everyone is fucking flaming me for the 10% and never praising me in my 80-90? You know, like you guys remember
life, buddy.
You guys remember the Shahrukh in 2018? Like,
yeah, of course.
They were hinting so fucking hard, but at the same time they were smurfing so fucking hard. Like sometimes they just die and they laugh on stage. You know, like I actually took it to hard because I played against them in scrims. We got fucking demolished, and I just learned a lot from it. You know, actually, Rookie was really the only mid laner I could. I mean, I solo killed him a few times. He solo killed me maybe the triple, quadruple, but like it was the only mid laner I felt it's so hard to play against. And like after that experience at Worlds, it was like a changer in my playstyle. Like I just wanted to not mimic, but make that experience as much mine as possible. You know.
Well, the reason why people criticize you, Jiizuke, is because they don't see the difference between the way you play, which is one of the most valuable assets to having you on a roster, right? But if the team isn't built properly, because if you, for example, if you die and there's no other pressure or there's no other play being made elsewhere on the cross map, then what happens is you die and then the enemy team just takes an objective, right? And so it looks like you're the problem because you shouldn't have made that play, which kind of is true. You probably shouldn't be taking high risk plays in those situations, but we're not going to change you, right? And you don't want to change you. A smart GM doesn't want to change you because your value is that thing. But what you have to do is you have to create a team that will support that style of play and create pressure elsewhere, because that's been the big difference between this split and previous iterations of EG, is that now there's constantly someone else creating pressure, which either is doing one of two things. It's either you're helping them dive on that pressure, so you're moving to them, or if you're staying in one place, even if you die, someone else is doing something somewhere on the map. Right. And so you dying doesn't mean anything because the way that League of Legends is played right now is around minion wave pressure. So as long as you're actively doing the right thing with the minion waves and playing around that pressure, the disadvantage that you have from dying is very low, I would say.
I think the biggest example is the Cloud9 game. I was Riot and we have a Tristana bot. So the scenario was that we have Herald and Tristana bot and we just killed their bot lane or jungle or something. They are resetting coming from base, and if they don't defend bot, they're losing 3k gold and all the jungle camps. And for me, I decided, well, they are gonna fucking defend bot, right? So I just walk into enemy jungle, I want to dive on a stacked wave top. I just want to dive in, and then Lucian and Braum show up, and I'm like, the fuck is happening here? And then I broke my face rush, tried to run away, they just flash on me, they kill me, okay? I got flamed so fucking hard for that. But that play just gave 3k gold in the bank of Tristana.
Yes.
3k gold.
By the way,
this
is what we talked about last week. This is exactly the situation we talked about last week when we were discussing EG.
Got 5 play, like you cannot trade against Tristana with Herald. You cannot. You just lose. Yep. Like it was just my mind breaking to me because I felt like I was doing the right play. I'm gonna dive Jace and it's fucked, but they have to really defend bot. Otherwise they're fucked. And the moment that they decide to defend the play, they just give up the game, in my opinion. Like they just lost on that.
This is exactly the situation that I talked about last week on the show, which is that was the game where Danny had like no kills, but he was up 2,000 gold. And that's what I was saying, is that this is the difference with Danny, is that, you know, he doesn't get a lot of counter picks. He's first picking, but if you pick something like Tristana that can clear waves quickly and can destroy towers quickly in these scenarios, it doesn't fucking matter what happens to you.
If it was a Jiizuke on that side, they would have said, Jiizuke doesn't care about his team. He's not playing the game. Just always farming on side. What is this guy doing? Look at him, 0-0-0. His team, I have 10 kills, 10 assists. What's happening? That's what would have happened. But to the other point, also like it's not entirely true that we don't give counter to Dan, because I wanted to understand that 3 pick on red side is very powerful. Like you can always pick and ban, right? Sure. So like whoever picks on 3 is like never fucked. So and then always picks on 3 most of the time. But sometimes he picks on 2, like Tristana, Philius, the champions. But like the power on red side is always 3 and 5, and like also is like. It depends who goes on for 5. It depends as well who can go for 5 based on champion pool, you know. Okay. Like for example, sometimes I get counter where maybe I don't want it. I just wanna pick on 3, you know. It's like sometimes there is advantage in that. But like sometimes I just
problem is I'm not that much of an expert about League of Legends, Jiizuke, so I get lost with all like the red, blue, 5. What starter race in Pokemon would I be, and what evolved champion would it be? Like, you know, that's like how I learn League of Legends. I prefer, you know, the analogies and the references to pop culture, you know. Exactly. I get what you're saying though. I'm sure, you had some decent picks, of course. Yeah. The only thing is, though, am I wrong, Monty? Didn't we even have, I think it might even be when Empire came on the show, I think he even referenced then that like Danny was like practicing Syndra and was going to like expand his thing. Now, listen, it obviously didn't work in this one game, but if it worked in scrims, it makes sense, though. Especially because NA is actually notorious for people never playing mages as the AD carry in general.
I mean, the thing about it too is like I think it can be objectively good in some ways, because if you're looking for wave clear. So for example, if you want to play split push strategies, then playing certain mages that can be played in bot lane like Ziggs, for example, Syndra to a lesser degree, because Ziggs is one of the best wave clear champions in the game. Well, all you have to do is park Danny in mid lane, and he's just going to clear waves while Jiizuke and Impact just do their shit in the side lanes, right? So I think it's objectively, judging by EG's strategy, potentially a good pick.
I mean, to me, Perks in 2019 just demolished everyone like that, because no one was ready for Mage's bot. He just went and picked Mages, and they're like, haha, you have to play my game now. And then they cannot play his game. He has fucking experience for like, oh, many years, 6 years, 7 years, and they just go 8. And then he's going bot and he's destroying everyone, but like, no one else can do it. And they try to copy, but they cannot. And it's like, he just had the immense advantage, and you saw it at MSI, right? Like, SKT against G2. Like,
yes, the semi-finals. Yeah,
the enemy team had no idea how to play against Syndra. By the way, just saying, enemy team had I was
no,
watching this. Enemy team has no idea, and they're SKT. Like, that says a lot, It just,
I mean, my favourite personally was season 8 summer when they had the funnel meta and they started also playing Mage's bot, and then Reckless was just like Cartman, just like, screw you guys, I'm going home. And he just literally didn't even play for like 10 games or something. Like, what? Disallowed. What? And then he just came back, just rolled back in, didn't he? His mental Bwippo was just playing instead of him. I forgot Bwippo already roll swapped once. He was already better than Reckless. No wonder he's better than fucking Broxer too. And self-made.
To be fair,
fuck it, I'm not gonna play this funnel shit. Just punch me.
Exactly. It's like, fuck this, I'm out. Peace.
To be fair, I wish Doublelift had done the same thing so that we wouldn't have had to watch him try and play Mages either. You could shit on Reckless, but we did have to suffer through some of those guys like actually attempting to do it.
But actually, Reckless is the one that adapted the most, no? Like, he was playing all of them. Even played Janna.
He did eventually.
Played Karma, Janna, Syndra.
Yes.
I think he played something else as well, but he is the one that actually said, oh, I need this in my book, otherwise I'm not gonna be like, I'm gonna be a weakness to my team, And they actually learned.
Sure.
But there are so many people that are like, I'm gonna stick with guys and I'll just do my job, I'm late game carry, that's it, but
to me, I always felt like Reckless was a natural Karma player his whole career. I didn't know it was taking him so long to. I even suggested Janna for him, but he was like, "What for AD carry?" I was like, "Oh, you still want to play AD carry?" Like, my bad. Yeah, all right, mate. See ya.
I mean, my favorite that year from Fnatic was the Karma Pike. They played the Karma Pike bot, and Illisang is farming, and then a Fat Pike is just. It was also the Tiamat, now they removed that.
Yes.
But like with Tiamat, you will basically clear one-shot the wave, and then you can do whatever you want in the map. And then Illisang was just a super smurfing the game. Like,
of course.
It was doing really whatever they wanted to do.
Thing is, I don't know if people know this. If you ever watched back in that era solo queue and you actually watched Illisang play, this isn't even a joke. He would just pick Pike a million times, and then the second the game wasn't winnable, Monty, it's like he was playing Dota 2. He would just go and start like split pushing as Pike support, just like constantly until the other team can come like with boots and shit. Like, it's so good. The thing is though, even though it did look like he was half in the game, like, it was so entertaining to watch. I can't lie. It was super sick.
Yeah.
What a sick player.
Actually, this goes back to my topic that I was really talking in solo queue, right? And there are so many secret accounts that I didn't know about.
Okay.
Illisang was one of them, and I flamed him, but I did. I flamed so many players, but it's like in solo queue,
you said it was them, and so they got insulted. Dude, that happened to me. Like, I actually had, no joke, I won't say the name of the player to be kind. When I like meme on stupid fans and do like hashtag fan logic, I actually had, no joke, like a super legendary CS 1.6 player messaged me, like, when I asked him to do like an interview, I was like, do you want to do an interview? He's like, I might do, but by the way, you actually flamed me once on my alternate account. I was like, don't put stupid shit in, anyone can get it. You know how it fucking goes, mate. You can do it on the main and you can get it.
Honestly, you can meet me in solo queue one day. We just flame each other, and then the next day it was just that. Like, it's whatever. Like, I don't.
No need to catch feelings.
To me, I don't. As long as you don't put families and stuff in it. Like,
exactly.
They do it a lot in NA. Like in you, it just you flame each other's skill. That's it. And then there is like this part of players that like flame like hard, in Europe. But like mostly it's just about skill, and as long as about skill, you don't really care.
Jiizuke, what you mean is like, because this is like a weird thing about North Americans, is they do have like a fairly immature style of trash talking. Like their style of trash talk, no joke, is like, yeah, what about your mama? But they just mean it like generically. But as you know, if you're from Italy, you're like, what about my fucking mama? Get everyone from Sicily, we're taking his mom. You're like, whoa, just ban it. Because all you need to know, no, whatever. I'll save that story. Some stories have to stay in the vaults. Keep it in the vault. Thorin.
Just
Some
do it
stuff-
next week.
yeah,
Just do it
exactly.
next
I can't use it all this week. Exactly.
I have to
Well,
keep them.
That's what we always tell people are the rules of trash talking is you can only trash talk things about people that they can change about
Yes.
themselves, such as their skill, their personality, these things. You don't fuck with things that are outside of somebody's control because it's not funny anymore. And it's also just lame and not entertaining. So
Actually, a fun story is that Sven, this is Karen.
This the jungler one, not the AD carry. Yes. Okay.
When I was,
what did he flame?
when I-
Because he's got a bad history with flame, mate. so
Yeah,
I'm
he
already
does.
scared. No,
No,
we
when
need
I-
to cut this.
He broke the
no,
rules.
I was,
He broke the
I
rules.
I was a one-trick Lulu in that time, like 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I was
Okay.
a one-trick Lulu. Believe it or not, I was a one-trick
Playing
Lulu.
mid lane still.
Play mid lane. But, I mean, it was Ludens. He one-shot people. It was.
All
really
right.
fun to
Okay.
play. But anyway, like I remember that I met Sven one time in Champion Select, and he said, if I don't play Lulu, he's gonna fucking end the game. And he will never play the game if I don't play Lulu. Like you will let you see is like it was like we would always flame each other, but then we ended up in the same team together. That's actually like, and then when we met, we were like, oh, you're not the guy in solo queue, you know? Is like we're just laughing it off. It's like solo queue is a very dark place. I think you are never, and I'll say never, meet the same person in solo queue as you meet in real life or like in a team
course not.
environment. That is for sure. And I think many people, me included, got fucked really hard by solo queue like ideas. Yeah.
Here's the thing: solo queue is like going to an anonymous masked sex dungeon for BDSM. Like you're there for something totally different. No names. It's not about real life. Yeah, you're pissing in a guy's face, but maybe he likes it. Like anything goes down there. But when you come out of solo queue, you got to retain your humanity again, haven't you? You got to put the degeneracy behind you and just be a fucking productive member of society.
Yeah.
There's the
Accurate
analogy you
analogy.
never thought was coming in, isn't it? Listen, you're not going to get these analogies on the LCS broadcast, boys and girls. You're not going to get them. You have to understand that.
No, Thorin is a trademark, you know, owned by-
Exactly. No, listen, people think I'm joking. Unironically, that is my real strategy. What I've figured out in life is this, Jiizuke. You can't always be the absolute best. You can't always be the most liked. What you got to do is you might like this. It's your playing style. You've got to be the absolute best at what only you can do exactly that way. Because if you
Yeah,
are
for
that
sure.
player, I think you've done this in your career. I think, in my opinion, this is why Leader actually is in LEC because he embraced that style. Then no one else can do exactly what you do in your exact way. So if people like it, they've got to come. There's only one game in town at that point. Whereas, as
Yeah,
I
of
say, who
course.
wants to be like a bad version of someone else?
I mean, of course, if you are unpredictable, then it means the enemy won't know what the fuck do you do, you know? In game.
Exactly.
It's like, it's just a strength.
And I'm unpredictable as fuck. Like, I bet Jack
And,
came on the crackdown. He was like, oh, Thorin's sort of cooled down with the years. He's really sort of taken the harsh edge off. Maybe we could have a friendship. Was it? What's this video? It was like, well, sorry, Jack.
I mean, if I had to
Couldn't get
choose,
your line, mate. Couldn't get the number.
like, if I had to choose between being myself and getting flamed on Reddit over, I don't know, name a mid laner playing for KD, I don't know, Pobelter, Jensen, I don't know. Jensen maybe is the more realistic approach. If I had to be Jensen and just, oh my god, he's so good and everything, you know, but he doesn't do actually much in the early game or like, all he might do is go 15 sad because the enemy mid is actually playing for the team, right? That's it. But like, he's not actually doing the winning play. I don't know, diving. Okay. Now he's
I'm not sure he
basically
knows
doing a
other
bit-
lanes
now he's diving
exist right
sides
now.
and stuff. Now he's diving
Yeah,
sides
exactly.
and stuff. But it's only recently. Like to me, he has always been the player.
Did you
that,
see the TF game?
stays in mid. How much time
You
did he
say
press ult?
that.
How much time did he press ult?
I don't think he knows that TF has an ult. That would be my takeaway from watching that game.
I was so surprised when I watched that. I was so surprised that they were playing TF, and I mean the logic of TF is that against first I don't know why Alfari won GPJ's matchup. I have no fucking clue. But
Is he god?
then basically they wanted to pressure Jace with the TF. So level 6 GP has a winning matchup, you know. But I never saw it. Like Fudge didn't even give it. Wait, was it Fudge? No, it was Uni, right? It was Uni, the Jace. He didn't even give a shit. He went Onions against a TF, which basically it means I'm gonna go 10 deaths this game, and he didn't give a shit, you know. Like if TF would have ever gone to his lane, he would be dead. always 100%. It's just gold card into GP ult 1-8. Oh, dead.
Dude, I like the way he actually sort of tried to dial back the toxicity there, Monty. He went like, let's like say Pobel. Oh shit, actually he's been feeling really bad. Jensen, he's getting fucking millions. Yeah, fucking Jensen sucks, doesn't he? He's getting like 5 CS and while I'm off killing his top laner. Yeah, good job, dickhead. 5 CS. Like, all right. Okay. The show, of course. But yeah.
I will just say general KD player. If I had to choose between being me and being flamed over someone that is just playing for KDA and just actually not contributing to the win the game until team fights, I will still choose to be me. It's like,
yeah, of course.
No doubt about it. Like, yeah.
Delightful. All right. I think we've taken enough of your time, Jiizuke, for today. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's been a pleasure. We'll have you on again. Really appreciate you taking time on your day off, man, to come on.
Yeah, was a pleasure to talk to you guys. I've been watching actually. Thorin is just so funny to me. every time he goes in the zone. I will call it the Thorin zone.
Yes.
He goes on the Thorin zone for like that 1 minute. He will say so many words in 1 minute that I just cannot stop laughing. And then the fact is that it's so accurate, It's so accurate whatever he's talking about. But yeah, like, yeah. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me as well. And yeah, see you next time.
It's been great. I'm sure you'll do well in playoffs, man. Well, we're going to take a break and be back with viewer questions in just a couple. All right. We're here for viewer questions now to round out the show. As usual, go to the Discord for insight on esports and get yourself some Grog coins in the Grog Coin Lounge. There's a pinned post. If you get 25, you could be in the Grog Coin 25 channel, and then we'll answer your questions every show. So there you go. Very easy. If you don't know the Discord, type !Discord in a Twitch chat, or it's linked in the YouTube description. It's a good place to be. Lots of actually good conversations there about esports with more, I would say, mature and dedicated fans. So if that is interesting to you, go ahead and join regardless of whether you're going to ask the questions or not. So actually, going back a little bit, here's a good question to start off because we just had an Italian player on the show. So in honor of Italy's win in the Euro Cup, are there any Italian literature that you would recommend? This guy recommends The Leopard, which I have not read. So are there any Italian authors that you like, Thorin?
I don't think I've ever read a single thing that was Italian.
That's not true because I recommended a book that you read, which is
the Italian
Invisible
Calvino.
Cities.
Yeah, okay. Technically, I guess I have then. Okay. I was trying to think of like classic literature or something. Yeah, that's actually a very good book, though. I will say. Basically, this book that I won't tell you the whole premise, but you can just go look it up. The reason this book is good is it's basically just a clever vehicle for this author who's really good at like descriptive, imaginatory scenarios to just come up with as many weird scenarios as possible. So yeah, this book by Italo Calvino called Invisible Cities. Pretty good one. That's the only one I think I've read then.
Yeah, and the premise of that is that it's Marco Polo describing these kind of fictional cities to Kublai Khan, and each of the cities is maybe like 3 or so pages long, but it's all just like kind of mind puzzles and theoreticals, so it's really good. Also, Umberto Eco, very famous Italian writer.
I've read a few then. I just don't know these fuckers are Italian. That's my problem, yeah. I've read like Name of the Rose,
Name of the Rose, great.
Yeah, those are some classics.
Yeah. So obviously Machiavelli as well, The Prince, short read, classic. You probably should read that if you're going to be educated in the modern world, I would say. This is a good question. What is the worst show or book a friend has highly recommended to you? Thanks, Doa, for all of those.
Oh, I can tell the obvious one. I'll tell you the obvious one right now. And here's the mad thing, Monty. This is how culture changes. When I've been saying this opinion for the last 3 years, so many people are now on my side. And you can confirm this because you were there back in the day. No one used to hold this opinion. I think Breaking Bad is one of the most overrated shows I have ever watched because it is so fucking slow. Nothing happens. And then things happen in the plot that aren't even like good. They're just stupid like plots. Like, oh, I just slit a guy's throat. And the people are like, oh my God, this is like The Sopranos times 10. And so I actually watched that, Monty, and this is why I hate it. Because I didn't just watch like the first few episodes like I would with a normal show. I had all those friends who at the time I trusted who were like, Season 4 is unreal. So I watched the whole thing, and I remember I calculated I'd watched 60 hours of this shit, and at the end I was like, I hate this. So I remember saying to whoever, you don't even get to recommend it. You're banned from recommendations. I hate that show.
So I actually like Breaking Bad, but not because it's a drama. So first off, I think Bryan Cranston's acting is incredible in that show, and second off, I view it as a dark comedy, and so I just think it's hilarious. But I think if you view it as a drama, it's very soap opera-y. It's like over the top. But if you think it's a comedy, which it is, like it's actually a black comedy, it's very entertaining.
Here's the problem. I'll give you Bryan Cranston. He's pretty good. The Jesse guy's ass, the fucking wife is one of the most annoying characters to ever be made in cinema.
But she was intentionally annoying.
That boss guy was absolute joke. And by the way, when he walked out of that fucking... Spoilers, I don't give a fuck. When he walked out of that room with half a head, with like PlayStation 2 graphics, I was almost like, X out. How do I close the laptop down, throw it in the bin? Like, what is this? Like, no, that's the problem. That show didn't have a strong enough cast, mate. It wasn't like some Sopranos level shit with like god tier fucking actors everywhere, you know.
My criteria is like, do you think Breaking Bad is a black comedy or do you think it's a drama? And if you think it's a drama, like you lose credibility in my opinion.
What would be yours? Because here's the problem. Obviously, you referenced Door. I mean, I bet he's referenced a whole bunch of stupid sci-fi shit or something, right? Some terrible stuff to watch.
So I will say there's a lot of bad recommendations because people are just like fans of shit. And like when you actually have a long enough conversation with Doa, he can like admit the stuff's bad and he's just a fan because he's a fan of like, Star Wars or whatever. And even he got turned off like immensely by the latest trilogy of movies. So I think he's come around quite a bit. But I think like one of the worst shows was actually House of Cards, which was majorly hyped up by almost everybody. And I watched this show. I watched the first season.
Kevin Spacey is a banger, though. You got to give him that.
So I love Kevin Spacey as an actor. It's the same shit with Breaking Bad. Like I really like Bryan Cranston, but the thing about House of Cards is that first off, the whole like breaking the fourth wall soliloquies are just like super badly written Shakespeare. So if you like Shakespeare, it's just kind of just like awful. Like the concept is good, but the execution is very poor. And then the other aspect of it was it got so incredibly unbelievable. Like by the time, I hate it when characters break their own rules. So we're supposed to believe that Kevin Spacey's character is this very astute politician who's so thoughtful about what he does. And here's the thing. He's never supposed to get his own hands dirty. So by the start of the second season, when he pushes that reporter in front of the subway, I'm supposed to believe that he would do that spontaneously, do it himself, which is completely outside of his own character, right? And then also that there aren't any security cameras in the subway, like showing that he was doing this. So it became so unbelievable. It like broke the character's rules, broke reality, right? And like broke the plot.
The part that didn't make sense about that is by the end of the show, the worst character was his like henchman guy, that like dog fucker. Why wasn't he getting that guy to push someone on the front of the train? The whole point of that guy was to be his like fucking hand, like his fucking bagman or whatever, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But it's like the whole point of this character is that he's a manipulator. He's like the shadow, the puppet master, right? And so when he's doing his own dirty work, it just doesn't even make any sense. So I was like, I'm out.
By the way, even though I thought that show was all right, I thought like it was one of those ones where only the first couple of seasons are good. It gets really bad after that. Like that character, that dog character, becomes just annoying. Like he eventually, no joke, has like whole seasons where he's just a boring ass character. And he has this one part, right, where he, after ages, he decides not to kill this woman, starts driving away, then he just goes like, It's almost like that meme where that woman's like, he just decides to just go back and kill it. It's like, what was all this about then? This is garbage. Yeah, that was definitely overhyped. Because the problem is these are all shows that are winning like every Emmy, and everyone's like, oh, it's incredible. And also, here's how you know that a show isn't good: is there are very few shows as good in like season 6 or season 5. People. Once the hype train starts, even if a show was good in season 1, plebs just get on board. Like, plebs think Game of Thrones only sucked on the last season. That's the dumbest opinion of all time.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. Were you guys watching
those season as well?
Were you watching the last one before that? That was fucking trash, mate. That was also shit just happening that made no sense. So
that's because people can't accept. It's like, I very easily accept when something starts to get bad. Like with House of Cards.
When it gets bad. Yeah, I'm out.
As soon as that train scene happened, I just said, I'm done with this show forever. And I was. It's just like in Dexter. By the end of the second season, when they're like in the swamp and the crazy lady's just lighting everything on fire, I was like, I'm done. Like, people think the end of Dexter was bad. Dexter's first season is good, and then it's just shit after that. But people have a hard time because they like something and they think it's good. They get emotionally attached to it, and then they can't admit that it's bad after that. Just like Star Wars has been bad ever since they stopped making the original 3 movies.
Of course.
People would be like, oh yeah, well, what Rogue Squadron or whatever was good. It wasn't. It was shit, guys. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's a bad movie. The characters absolutely suck in that movie. You can't even describe any of the characters to me. They're so terrible. You can't even remember their fucking names. It's
Dude, I'm not even joking.
Movie.
Think about how movies work. You're in the cinema, all the lights, the programming, you've watched the whole film. If by the end of the movie, spoiler, 2 characters are going to die in a sacrificial manner, and I'm just like, fucking let them just roll the credits already. Like, I've got to be home. Like, I wasn't in any way hooked in that movie. Dude, I kept watching the whole time. Like, there's got to be one character. There's fucking Star Wars. Like, there's not, they're all like C-tier Star Wars characters, aren't they? That's why the idea ever was when they were like, great news, fans, we're going to be making unlimited Star Wars shows, but not your favorite characters in the rest of the universe. Like, well, why don't I want that? I only want to watch the fucking Jedi guys, don't I? I don't want to watch some guy over here doing some shit, running like a fucking bodega on some other country. I was like, why would I want that? That sounds trash. That's like, I don't know if you know this, but in comics, they've done the same thing. Like, famously in comics, right, they did a whole series that was about like the city of Gotham, but like fuck all about Batman. Like, he's in like, you know, like, he like swings past and they're like, oh, what's that about? Like, and then they go back to like, you know, all that shit. I'm like, this is you've literally identified the least interesting part of fucking Batman, you stupid motherfucker. Why would I want to watch this? It doesn't even make sense, does it? Is there a film though? Let's do a quick one for a film. Is there like a film that was egregious when people recommended it to you?
Oh, I'm trying to think.
Because I already know what. I'm not going to. Here's the thing. I'm not going to go off a friend recommended this. I'm just going to say society recommended this and you were wrong. And that is when, do you remember this period? This was real. When the movie Black Panther had a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. This wasn't even, I'm not joking, I've seen most of them. It wasn't even a fucking top 15 Marvel movie. Never mind 100% rating.
Right.
Like, it was a fucking average at best, and some of it was trash.
I think Avatar is definitely one of the ones that has been.
Has anyone ever recommended that to you though? Does anyone actually like that movie?
I mean, society recommended that to me.
oh no, you're right. Actually, I forgot this, dude. Do you remember that story? There's no way it can be real. It must be a psyop. You'll remember this though. You remember when Avatar came out and there was all those news stories that were like, and people are getting an illness where they feel withdrawals because they can't actually live in the Avatar movie after watching it at the cinema. I was like, motherfucker, you deserve to live in the Avatar world. What are you talking about? It's a shit movie. And also, it's that garbage 3D that's just wrecking my eyes all the time. Like, please, I haven't got enough red horns or whatever. Please, mercy. That's like I'm being tortured watching those movies.
I hate that too.
And then they were trying to tell us at the time, great news, all movies will be in 3D. I was like, I'm actually stop watching 3D movies in there.
I literally would just go to the 2D ones in the theater because the 3D was so badly done most of the time. It's just like used for like jump scares or like some bullshit. Anyway. All right. Can any of the players on CLG have a resurgence or even be able to land a job after the utter shit show of that organization and their awful results? I'm hoping Finn and Broxa get another shot at least. I mean, that's the whole tragedy of CLG is like they do have 3 players who were Worlds last year. Were they the best players on any of those rosters? No, they were not. But at least, you know, they showed some ability to be like top 3 in their domestic regions. I mean, I think Finn is an interesting player. I think he's a very unique player. I think you'd have to kind of like build around him. Brox has at least had some good individual performances, but I think ultimately this is a case of a team being less than the sum of its parts. So I would say I hope so. But again, GMing has been so bad in the League of Legends scene overall, no matter what region you're in, that maybe not. Like certainly CLG is a team that is less than the sum of its parts. These players could be useful and probably get at a pretty good discount right now, frankly. So I would hope so.
The problem with Finn is that he's on the wrong team, like by definition. Like that's a guy where people knew he had some talent with the pop-off games in Europe, but the whole premise was he couldn't stay in Europe because on Rogue they needed like someone who could play tanks. So I thought when they signed this guy, you understand you are going to play the whole game around him, right? You're going to put him on all the carries he wants, and you're going to play the game through him. In NA, of course, it's still a team fight. It's not even a meta. It's just a team fight decade, isn't it? Like maybe next decade, Finn, come back in 2030, mate. I don't know. Yeah, the problem with those players is I assume most of them will be in LCS still. I don't know if many of them will be on top teams. I also think, by the way, I mean, I know you only just got subbed in. I've always thought, I don't understand how DeMonte always starts as a sub, then comes in, which, by the way, by definition, if you come in later without the experience of playing all the scrims and all the official matches, you should be way worse. Why does he always come into the game and then win a whole bunch of matches? Like, I've always thought DeMonte's a pretty decent player, actually. He'll definitely be on a team in my, well, unless the GM fucks it up again.
We'll see. Let's see here. Which would you rather be subject to? Riot's ruthless totalitarian rule where any dissent is met with an iron fist of punishment and gaslighting, or Nintendo's full-blown neglect that's interrupted only by spats of shutting down tourneys for never disclosed regions? Yeah, those are the two ends of the spectrum for sure. Whether you'd rather have Riot or Nintendo as your game dev. I think I'd take Nintendo because even though they did shut down Smash for a while, the cool thing about Smash now is it just kind of exists in its own universe where you can do whatever you want with the game. It's not being patched. I mean, if you guys saw like the Mango win yesterday,
yep.
I wasn't able to watch that, but I saw it on Twitter and it seems pretty hype. Like Smash is a great game with great storylines, and I would much rather be able to have independent parties control the storylines, control the hype, and not have the game patched. So I'd take Nintendo personally.
Basically, Monty's point there, which is an astute one, is they're just bad at different areas of the industry. Like the good part about Nintendo is because they neglect the scene, it allows you to just play a hardcore game for like 15 years or whatever the fuck. The downside is they won't put any actual like development into the scene. You have to do it all yourself, and that's why their scene is still
shut it down.
Their scene is still stuck at like stupid shit where people are carrying TVs around and playing like top pros. Like, what the fuck is this? Meanwhile, Riot's thing is like, oh yeah, we're going to put all this money in, but we control every element and we're not allowed to have any fun. Like I hate those choices because that's like, would you like to have your balls smashed in with a hammer or slowly saw your dick off them? It's like dealer's choice. I guess you could just have that one. They're both bad. Both suck. But I agree with you. If I had to pick, I'd actually prefer the one where they just don't fuck with the meta because I like games where you just get a static meta for a long time.
Yeah, and it's completely run by independent operators, and so I'd rather have the threat of them just like randomly, arbitrarily like preventing me from running tournaments rather than have to run tournaments on very specific rails or not be able to run tournaments at all. Who would you rather have in the LCS, CLG Coast or Echo Fox? Look, guys, I don't think CLG is terrible. That's like everybody else's opinion right now. I guess I'd rather have Echo Fox maybe, but they all had pretty serious issues. Can I take Echo Fox without like the rampant racism? Like, I don't know. I think CLG
internal emails.
Yeah, exactly. Can I have Coast without like David Slan owning it? Like, I guess CLG is like the least of those evils.
I'm going to cheat and just say I want Renegades back.
Be entertaining for sure.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, fuck it. Maybe Crumbs can even play again.
Do you think inner monologue can be done well in film or TV? And if so, what is your favorite example of it? Well, it's interesting. I mean, yes, if you're doing Shakespeare, because Shakespeare was actually one of the few humans able to write soliloquies, right? That's why nobody ever tries. And House of Cards did it badly. I just don't think it's a good medium for that for the most part. Like, you have to get pretty abstract, and people like Shakespeare is very divorced from reality, and it's much more based in like symbolism, and it doesn't feel like real life. You know what I mean? So I guess the equivalent is that where you do see that in film and TV is in musicals or opera, right? So I think you have to have a medium that divorces you from reality enough so that you can buy into it. I think if you're doing realism with an inner monologue, it's really difficult.
I don't think it fits the medium. It just like, yeah, more logically, an inner monologue is for novels that are from like a POV, you know, just the best way to write it, isn't it?
Yeah, but you have to have a medium that kind of breaks the fourth wall, or that is removed enough from reality that it becomes.
Oh wait, I've got one. Did he say movies or movies and TV?
Movies and TV.
There's actually a TV show. It's a British show that actually doesn't. It's called Peep Show, and the whole premise is like that, Monty. You see a person's POV, and you just hear their thoughts inside their head, and it switches to the other POV. It's a comedy though. It's very good actually.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing, is the medium of doing it. Like, you can't have a realism show and have it done that way.
No,
like
the
entire
thing
has to be. Yeah, exactly. If TES disbands for whichever reasons, which player do you want to see go to which team?
Does it have to be LPL teams?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I do think that is an example of a team which, even when they were at their best last year, it never was a proper coherent team. It looked like someone just put a bunch of superstar players together and they were like, I'm just going to pick whatever I want and smash everyone. Like, okay. But they never looked like they were like sick macro. So the funny thing is, you could probably make some amazing LPL teams if you switch all those players around. Like, I'll give you one right now. Even though directly he's always had some weird edge on him. When you look at how good overall the roster of like RNG is, fucking Jing Dong, if you just put Knight as the mid laner on one of these teams, it'd be game over, mate. They'd be too good. They'd probably win Worlds.
Yeah, I think like that's the because RNG was able to win MSI with like a super questionable mid laner. So I think that's the obvious choice is you put Knight over there. Now, I don't know enough about kind of the mid-table LPL team styles to really be able to say like how you would upgrade based around like building one of those rosters around one of Top's players. So I'm afraid I'm just not knowledgeable enough about that. But I agree with you, Thorin, that obviously upgrading another top team with Knight is the easy move. Do you think we'll ever be able to see a true open source game esport, like if a team of modders / rogue devs cloned League of Legends was actually able to make it a non-developer run esports thing?
I've got some bad news for you. Here's the problem. This is not a hypothetical. People have done it more than once.
Yep.
In Counter-Strike, what happened is the version everyone remembers the classic is Counter-Strike 1.6, right? They brought out Counter-Strike Source 7 years before 1.6 ended. It just wasn't as popular. So what happened was the reason everyone didn't swap to Source is the game engine felt totally different. And if you like 1.6, it was just whack. I'm just going to say that. It was closer to CSGO, but it's kind of whack. So what happened was Alex Garfield, famously of EG, actually basically set up a team that was making a pro mod and it used the Source engine and it made it feel like 1.6. And I actually got to play like the alpha or whatever version of it, and it did. It literally, no joke, felt like when he sprayed the Colt, it felt like you were spraying the M4 in CS 1.6. The problem is this: one, he was too late because CS:GO was already coming out, and Valve was obviously behind it, and that's the killer right there. It's not about how good, and the other one's obviously too good, making diabolical kind of like Quake's vibes, right? The flaw that you guys aren't realizing is this: what makes an esport? Spoiler, it isn't that the game's really good. It isn't even that the game has loads of players. That's like some old world thinking. In the modern day, the size of the esport is how much money the developer is willing to put in. So unfortunately, if it's an open source game, even though for hardcore people, we can have an awesome, like, StarCraft remastered type circuit, you won't ever have like a League of Legends game. You got to put a lot of fucking money in, because in the modern day, here's the difference. When I used to be doing Quake and Counter-Strike, it was the tournament organizers like ESL who paid all those costs. When it became the modern day, a lot of these TOs were like, whichever game dev pays, that's the game we'll run. If you give me like $300,000, yeah, I'll run a League of Legends. By the way, that's the only reason League of Legends got into things like IEM over Counter-Strike. They were like, they're going to give us all the prize money. It's a slam dunk. So the problem is the very fact that it's open source, unless you could somehow crowdfund, probably means I don't think there'd be enough money to make it a big game.
I mean, I also kind of disagree about the player base, because I think most people watch esports to get better at the game. So I think if you don't have a big player base, it's really hard. And it's hard to have a big player base around games that competitive people really love, because you have to have a certain amount of skill expression and difficulty. And most plebs don't want to play those games. So games that are created by independents to be for the hardcore audience, like Diabolical is a great one, don't really have huge amounts of player base to kind of support the game. So either somebody's going to invent an esport that is so attractive from a viewership perspective that nobody has to play the game, but people are still going to be psyched about it, or you kind of have to have a developer make a game that is perhaps less on the skill expression side. So I think it's tough. And I also think that if you're going to make a AAA game, it's hard to do that independently. AAA titles cost $500 million, $1 billion to make, like hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's, I think the ideal, like if you had to ask me the ideal solution to this problem, it would be if a bunch of professional teams got together. So like, for example, if all the professional teams decided to co-invest in the development of a tactical shooter, and then they used their Counter-Strike teams to test the tactical shooter and kind of take feedback from the professional players in Counter-Strike to create a new tactical shooter, and they were going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. And that way, there wasn't a conflict of interest between the developers and the esports side, because they would be the same entity. That's what I would do. But getting the teams to agree to do that would be impossible. So there you go. What is an aspect of music that you would like people to explore more that you feel is not? Also, if it is within reason, state why this aspect is compelling. I don't know what you mean by aspect of music, like a genre. We'll go with genre.
I can give you an answer. Like, I would say, because the reason I'm going to give this angle is because, unfortunately, these have basically become like a meme that people use to talk about how pretentious, you know, someone is. It's concept albums. There are some amazing concept albums, like Pink Floyd, obvious ones like The Fucking Wall, The Final
That's
Cut.
why I like Porcupine Tree.
There's another classic one. Maybe like Dredge. They have like one that was a pretty banging one. One of their first ones, I think. There's a whole bunch, like basically a lot of prog rock bands have them, some of the early Rush stuff. Like, the premise is essentially you make like a theme through the music, and it allows you, it's a bit like orchestral music. You can have like callbacks to refrains that were earlier. Like, the problem with it is you do have to be really high level musicians usually to do this. You have to obviously be kind of a genius to map it out. But if you land it, it's way better than just like random, you know, the album where every song's different and one's the fun song, one's the party song. It's like, you can really go pretty deep on that shit.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, as somebody who likes to listen to entire albums and always has, rather than just kind of a record, which is a collection of singles that don't really have a theme or any kind of narrative or storytelling aspects to them, I think that is super underrated. I also think people just don't have the patience to listen to like a 75-minute concept album anymore. But that's one of the reasons why I really like Porcupine Tree, is that I feel like they always made really complete albums, or like Pink Floyd, like you're talking about, for sure. Let's see here. In a year where the LCS lost Bjergsen but added Abadage and Perks, Jensen is on pace for one of, if not the worst years of his career. True. The table was set for him to take what appeared to be his rightful place atop the LCS, but given that he is doing anything but, if things continue this way, how much will it hurt his legacy? Does the Jat Alfari, Santorin, Armeo situation warrant giving him a pass? I think it's really hard when your team is combusting from a leadership standpoint. You have to deal with all of this drama, and your junglers being swapped out, including deep into a playoff run, where, by the way, you almost win the split anyway. And then also your star top laner that you were probably excited to play with gets subbed out as well. I think it's tough to blame this all on Jensen, but yeah, he's individually playing badly, but that could be a lack of motivation given the really stupid circumstances he's found himself in. I think he's still a great player.
I'll say this. First of all, he definitely has had one of those years, and he's had some pretty bad looking games, especially, by the way, during that whole Jenkins Alfari thing. He had some pretty bad games there that were screamers. I will say, behind the scenes, if you knew, here's the sad thing. I memed about this on Twitter. You know what? In the breaking news, new episode of Why Reddit's Always Wrong, the new take on Reddit that I was reading today, Monty, is because Alfari did an interview with Travis where he implies that, yeah, maybe I did have some attitude problems. The new take is Jat did nothing wrong. Now, what's mad about that is I know things that people don't know that I didn't want to reveal. By the way, some of them to project Jat, because they're just not things that, in my opinion, should come outside of the locker room. There are things, and how I've even got some extra information about some of the shit. Like, the shit he was up to was absolutely unacceptable. Like, it wasn't just like, he was just telling him to play harder. He wasn't just disciplined, but it was just, he crossed the line. He didn't quite know what distance to keep with himself and how to keep it super professional. So, like, basically, if you think about your coaches in that scenario, you've been bringing in, like, the cold guy, I don't think was even there before. They brought him in, like, this year. Then you think of his last 4 splits. Go back to last year. He didn't have Broxer for most of the first split, and Doublelift literally was taking the split off, even though he was in the fucking game getting paid and fucking around with TSM's president. By the way, I could say that a million times. They made that public information. I never did. Then they had the summer split, where obviously he just got the new coach, and it was like Broxer actually was pretty, I wouldn't say he was terrible, but he was pretty non-existent. Not a great one again. You remember, jungle mid has been the main synergy in League of Legends the entire fucking history. Then you come to the spring now, didn't even get to use his real jungler in the fucking playoffs, basically, when it mattered. So that might have been a title there. And then in summer, he's been pretty bad with all his problems. So it hasn't exactly been the greatest time the last couple of years. I will say, though, I agree with the narrative. Aside from Perks coming, I remember thinking, like, this is your chance to just be the number one guy, mate. And especially with the storyline that I knew he could have joined TSM. It's like, mate, this was just the time. So it's underwhelming, put it that way. Then again, he's had such a long career. It's not like it ruins his career because he didn't do great this year, is it?
He can also bounce back, like, obviously.
For sure.
That's the other thing, is like, he's still a very good player, but I think Jensen, what this has revealed about Jensen as a person is that he is very influenced by his environment, his performance, which is true of everybody to a certain degree. But like you said, he kind of had a choice to like practice really hard and step up. But it seems like when confronted with these difficulties, which have been numerous and in fact overwhelming, I think like losing your jungler and Alfari at the same time is probably a really tough situation, but his reaction to it has not been to step up. It's been to kind of like play badly on an individual level, right? Let's move on. Which is the bigger salt mine, the Godric salt mine or a Brazilian TSM fan? Holy shit. I mean, you have more experience with the Brazilians than I do. I just have the experience with the TSM fans.
The problem is this. In the isolated world where, like, obviously, like, Brazil isn't that relevant in League of Legends, so I'm very rarely ever interacting with them. In the isolated world of League of Legends, yeah, TSM fans are the absolute worst, literally by hands down. Like, even Fnatic fans aren't as bad because some Fnatic is sometimes actually legit internationally. Whereas TSM fans are permanently stuck in a state of delusion, except for their 15-minute post-coital after they've been fucked in LCS, where they go on TSM subreddit, vent it all, and then right after that, they come right back. No, but I believe in the boys and Reggie and Bjergsen will get. Like, they have that one little moment of lucidity.
They have the shortest post-nut clarity of all
Basically,
time.
yeah. They have the lucidity where they flame everyone. Then the same account the next week say, I always knew Reggie'd do this, and I always believed in Power of Evil and Speaker anyway. Like, so obviously TSM fans are bad, but here's the difference. Generally, TSM fans' way of getting harsh is like, you should be fired, everything you say is a lie, like, you know, you're just mean for no reason, you just hate us. That's pretty annoying. Brazilian fans will legitimately tell you, like, I will murder you and your family. Like, there's not a lot of banter in that. That's the problem. So I would put the Brazilian fans at the worst in that scenario. There you go, TSM fans. You're not even the best at being the worst. Just can't fucking win, can you? Can't win. And thankfully, I don't speak Chinese, Mandarin, or Korean, so I don't know about how bad their fans are, but I've heard some stories put out here. Thankfully.
Although I think the Korean fans' toxicity is pretty mild because, like, frankly, I don't even understand why people cave to the Korean fans' request. Like, if they're just driving trucks around with, like, messages that flaming me, you know what I would do, Thorin? I would literally walk up to that truck and, like, take meme pictures next to it and just post it on social media and not give a fuck what they think. So people just aren't fighting the right battles with the Korean fans, I think. All right, let's move on. Last question. It seems many devs are lowering the barriers of entries to their game to boost player bases. I agree with that sentiment. League in Season 3 through 6 didn't have extra mobility items for every class the way it does today. Champions like Viego and Gwen have insane kits and endless outplay potential despite being relatively easy to play. Recent titles such as in FPS, such as Warzone and Fortnite, do everything but give you an aimbot. What, in your opinions, are some of the best games, any genre today, that allow for meaningful skill expressions? Are there any new titles that have the potential to become a successful esport? I mean, I think Counter-Strike is an excellent example of a game that has extremely high skill expression. But that's because there aren't very many ways in which they can kind of decrease the skill floor in that game because it's all based on mechanics and teamwork. Would you agree?
It's definitely one of the best in the modern day, yeah. Bearing in mind there aren't like maybe like old school hardcore games around. Funny thing, if he means newer titles, it's going to be hard because I have to say, like, I don't think Valorant fits the bill very well. Put it this way, I just did an interview with Daps, who came back from Valorant, and he essentially said in Valorant, one of the reasons why all the washed up CS pros are having a second revival there is that in that game it's way more stratified, kind of like a MOBA. I mean, I'm putting in the MOBA part where it's like you play this type of a role, you just have to do this one thing. Whereas in Counter-Strike, you might be the entry, but if you're on the other side of the map to the bombs at the attack, suddenly you're the lurker. Like, you have to actually do you have to at least understand the premise of what the major roles are. So I would say, even though people look at Counter-Strike frag movies and they think, oh, it's like Quake, it's just all railing people. There's actually like a lot of like sort of game sense things that are built into the meta of the game you have to understand. So unfortunately, it's only really old school games like StarCraft, fucking Smash Brothers, I've heard it's pretty good, Street Fighter or whatever. I can't think of any modern day game that was that. I'll tell you what, I don't give a fuck what anyone on Reddit says. Overwatch was a very skilled game. Skilled. Go back now and watch people like Prophet, Striker, fucking, who else in terms of the DPS players? Showfor. There were some bangers in that game. Some Fletter. These guys, by the way, I'm not joking. Some of them are as skilled as fakers in League of Legends. I'm telling you right now. I don't give a fuck that you're all going to get salty. These were really sick carries.
And it's true that you say was, too, because I think the development of the game and the meta took away the skill ceiling in that game in a lot of ways on an individual level, which was part of the problem. But I think in the early days of Overwatch, yeah, and like Season 1 of Overwatch League, definitely. I think it's just hard to watch. And also the development of the game and the new champions, the new characters that were released, the new heroes, kind of took away from that by providing very easy barriers or shields or ways to like deny the skill expression, which was always, I think, the core problem with Overwatch. And I mean, if you guys want proof of this, just look at some of the players that have transferred over from Overwatch to Valorant, right? Like these guys are some of the best players in Valorant right now because I think of the teamwork and aim and mechanics that they had in Overwatch. It is a difficult game to play for sure. But as for other games, I mean, one of the reasons why I'm working with the Sunspear Games people on the Immortal Gates of Pyre, and you guys can go check out on my Twitter, I linked to a VOD that Doa and I did some explanation over like a short game. Like they're an indie developer, but I think they have really good ideas about RTS, and they're much more cut from the Brood War cloth. And I would like to see a return to like very high skill ceiling RTS play, because I still think it's one of the best genres to actually showcase skill expression in if it's done properly. So yeah, I think there are some potential titles, but the problem that you guys are going to see in terms of games development is it's very hard for people to get money to develop titles that aren't like mobile titles, because all venture capitalists want to do is dump money into like shitty MOBA titles that have a high chance of just like, you know, wringing people's wallets dry. So when it comes to actual like competitive titles, unfortunately, the incentives really aren't there for people to make them right now. It's a depressing time.
Like one thing a lot of fans, this is how you know, like we have our own like fucking bubble we all live in. They all assume, by the way, noticing these questions, that we're playing PC games. Think about India, China, Korea, like mate, everyone's on mobile phones all day long, like constantly. So unfortunately, those are the markets that people want to do. Just
yeah, Southeast Asia as well. And like you see like the mobile Call of Duty mobile or like PUBG mobile tournaments are huge in these regions. And I just think we're at an awkward point of technology. And to explain, like, mobile controls are never going to allow, and I say this as somebody who's casted mobile esports for like a year with Vainglory, mobile controls are never going to allow the same level of skill expression. So what we're trapped in right now is that we don't have like portable VR yet, right? Because at a point, there's going to be a point in time where you know, you're going to be able to move your hands and have it like be the controls of the game. And at that point in time, once that technology is mobile, you're going to have the same skill expression. But what we're kind of waiting for is for mobile, the technology to like, for mobile and PC to like merge into one entity. And at that point in time, then we will actually have like truly global esports. But unfortunately, we're just like in this stupid time period in tech where we can't have that, right?
By the way, I know they referenced in the question Warzone. Dude, you know, when I was doing that thing, it was months and months ago now. You know, when I had that thing where I just did like one light-hearted banter to a COD pro, and then all of COD was trying to come at me. And I was just like John Wick, just shooting like 50 people like this, right? By the way, I was dominating them as well. I don't give a fuck what anyone in COD says, because first of all, just go and fucking scam a bunch of kids with some crypto, you pieces of shit. But okay, here's the problem, right? Someone actually, well, obviously I had like some people who actually know COD telling me some stuff about those people, right? Dude, I actually thought they were trolling at first. You know, in Call of Duty, supposedly a level of aim assist still exists in the esport.
Yeah.
It's a fucking FPS game. I thought they were trolling literally. And they were like, no, certain things. I was like, aim assist, like, are you for fucking real? But that's the future, sadly, because that lets the fucking 14-year-old kid with all the Cheeto dust fucking blasting through all the mountains. You go, I'm fucking, this is sick. Because the problem in the modern day, everyone knows this, it's the dichotomy of esports. It's that the more casual the game is, the more popular it is. But then the worse the hardcore part of the esport is. And unfortunately, no one has ever properly married those together.
Yeah, and we just have to wait long enough, because here's the thing that nobody ever talks about, is that on a long enough timeline, esports and regular sports are just going to be the same thing. Because if you have a perfect environment, so if I'm wearing a suit that can like measure the strength of my muscles or measure my reactions, right? Then all of a sudden we can like revive virtual like Roman gladiatorial arenas. We could play basketball, but have it be, you know, take place in low gravity on the moon. We can play FPS where it's like you're actually running around in like a field or in a created environment like laser tag, but to you and the audience, it looks like you're in a battlefield or something like that, and you're actually relying on your physical ability to aim with a gun-like device in order to hit things. So there's not a universe where we don't actually see a union in the long term of sports and esports. They're not going to be different in like 50 years probably. So it's interesting to think about, but until then, we got to deal with this garbage. All right. That is the end of our questions for today, it would appear. So thank you very much for submitting your questions to the Grog Coin Lounge. We'll be back next Monday with another episode of Summoning Insight for you. We'll probably talk about some LEC at least next week because we didn't get around to that a lot today, having to focus on all the Team 1 drama. So we'll see you then.